Let's get peppy. Welcome to PEP 160. We are in the 160s. So exciting. That's Pep or Planet Extra podcast. It's an offshoot of Planet America on ABC Australia, which you can see on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. on ABC TV and 8 p.m. on Fridays on ABC News, or anytime you like on iView or Facebook at ABC Planet America, or on YouTube on the ABC News In-Depth channel. On PEP, we cover all the stuff that's too nerdy for TV. If you're listening to us, you can also find PEP on YouTube and Facebook, where you'll also find timestamps and show notes in the blurb. And if you leave a comment under those videos, we are likely to see it. You can also tweet us at PEPcastrDave. That's at PepChazDrDave. If you want to contact me privately, ask me on Twitter, and I will allow you to direct message or email me. But for now, a special guest PEPcaster who, well, look, once or twice he's raised the stakes of inconsequential views, but not very often. He's everyone's favourite opinion columnist and culture vulture, Bill Wyman. Hello, Bill.
Hi, Chaz. How are you? Thanks so much for having me again.
It's a pleasure, Bill. Thank you very much for coming. For your information at home, we are recording this at 2:19 p.m. on the 27th of May, Monday. I'm probably not going to get this up until Tuesday. So all the stuff in this is 24 hours old at least. I haven't read much from this weekend, but nothing's too topical. So we should be okay, hopefully. Bill, what are you grateful for?
What am I grateful for? I'm actually grateful for the news business.
Yeah.
I really am. It's a red-headed stepchild. I don't know if you have that phrase in Australia.
Yes.
It is such a mess, a hot mess. And at the same time, every once in a while, I marvel at the information that comes through, the availability of it. I'm old enough to remember growing up where you just couldn't get newspapers, you couldn't get music, you couldn't get movies, you couldn't see television. And for all its mistakes and problems and the way people take advantage of this multivarious, multifaceted onslaught of information, I think we have to appreciate there are so many kids out there who are thirsting for information. 20, 30, 40 years ago, they couldn't get that information. Now they can. So let's always remember, and believe me, I'm a media basher of long standing, but at the same time, let's not forget that the available that information, it is something that's very empowering. So
I think that's a really good call. And I do often think, because I'm also a media basher par excellence, but I do think that we sometimes take for granted the positives that have occurred in the last few years. Like, yes, sure, there's a lot of dumb news coverage out there.
Yeah.
But I think, for instance, data journalism, like that's just the last 10, 15 years. Yeah. Like if you go back to, like in my memory, if you go back to 20 or 30 years ago, the stats, the graphs that we just take for granted, that are basically the lifeblood of my entire career in terms of news, none of them existed 30 years ago. You just couldn't get them. And if you could get one. You couldn't get, well, let's break this up in 12 different ways. You just could not do that. Yeah. And that stuff is so valuable.
And a lot of people, to your point, used to have to construct it together. So I can't claim to be a big number cruncher of things like this, but just something as dumb as the inflation adjusted gross box office gross of Best Picture winners or the nominees for Best Picture. Yeah. Like now there's Box Office Mojo and stuff like this, but there was a time when you really had to just put those into a little spreadsheet and then try to adjust for inflation and then do averages. And it was very painstaking and time consuming.
Absolutely. And on that note, the economic version of that is, I don't know, some of you, the nerdier ones of you will know this already, but for those who are, casual consumers of news, you won't have heard of FRED, F-R-E-D. That is the best data source in American politics. Like, go to FRED and you will find the graphs on just about anything you could possibly want. You can control those graphs. You can control there's so much flexibility on how you can display your graph and exactly the nuance of that graph and what the scales are, what the y-axis is, what the x-axis is. You can mess around with it so much on so much information. It's just an amazing resource that just would not have existed 15 or 20 years ago unless, well, not even unless, I was going to say unless you're a professional economist. But even if you're a professional economist, it wouldn't be this easy. It's just so easy to use. Right. So yeah, so my advice to you, if you think yourself, hang on, I'm looking at Fred, I'm not going to find anything there. If you go Fred and unemployment rate USA, you'll see a graph from Fred, and then you'll be in Fred, and you can go from there. Yeah. So that would be my advice. That's really good pickup, Bill. I love that one. I've got two really quick ones. Number one, this is a serious one, and the second one's not so serious. Something we lose track of, is similar to yours really, is the magical possibilities of the internet. You never know when something awesome is going to happen. It usually doesn't happen. Usually it's the opposite of awesome. Yeah. But every now and then something awesome does happen on the internet because it just connects people in a way that without the internet is impossible. And it just happened. You might recall last PEP, my grateful was for Courtney Gore, who was a very impressive lady in Texas who ran for school board to expose the woke propagandists in the school board, only to find that they didn't exist, at least in her school district. They were just bureaucrats doing their best to try and help the kids out. And when she discovered that, she had a lot of integrity. So she told people the truth. And she stood by her principles, even though it ended up costing her peer group because they didn't want to listen to this. Yeah. And I gave her a big rev up because I found her incredibly impressive and inspirational. That she had knowingly brought this upon herself because she cared about the truth and cared about doing good for the public. She wasn't getting paid. She was a volunteer. You know, she had no benefits from doing this except for on her conscience, and I was so impressed by that. You know, how we like to joke how everyone's a pepper on this show. It seems that someone who is a pepper told Courtney Gore about her mention on the pod, and she made contact on Twitter. And that I just couldn't believe it. And I was so thrilled because I love the idea that we could hopefully make her feel just that little bit more appreciated and provide even the smallest extra award for her display of integrity, which was just not rewarded at all. Yeah. And that to me was just magic. I was so pleased that we could, that she could hear it, and she could hear this really, really nice excerpt about her, and she could contact me. I could contact her back, and that's the best part of the internet, bringing people together. And I'm very grateful for that. That's a serious one. The not so serious one is I'm grateful for The Apprentice. The Apprentice is a Trump biopic coming out soon. And I'm not grateful for the movie itself. I hate biopics. They tend to be awful. But what I'm grateful for is that any biopic set in the 1970s and 80s is going to have its share of shocking, poorly matched wigs. And because they can't make actors look like the original protagonists, but what they can do is give them a strange wig. And that's what they do in these movies. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I personally find terrible wigs in movies endlessly amusing. It's one of the reasons I enjoyed the 80s spy drama, The Americans, so much when that was on. It was a great show, but you were never more than 15 minutes away from a spectacularly atrocious wig or moustache. And I love that very much. So anyway, I'm grateful for the world's supply of horsehair and The Apprentice. Yeah.
I really, really agree with you on that. I am sometimes Scorsese basher. I don't know if you know that about me.
I don't.
But I think The Irishman, for example, what a tedious work, valorizing this complete bozo who, if you read up on him, he's a complete fabricator and just made up all these ridiculous stories, but also talk about bad wigs in The Irishman, one of the worst.
Well, I'm definitely
number
watch
one.
it then.
And number two, it also has a huge continuity error, which is when Al Pacino is sitting in court and someone tries to grab him or assault him, and the guy goes directly for his head, right? Yeah. And then there's a cut and then another cut, and then Al Pacino's hair is miraculously untouched. So it just, when you do those wigs, and it is amazing how that they have not gotten the quality up to it yet. But once you go down that path, all of a sudden you can't do a whole bunch of natural things, and it is not only do they look bad, it's just obvious that they're a wig because there's never a hair out of place, wind never touches it, no woman goes through a man's hair or vice versa.
Yeah, the only technology that hasn't advanced in the last 100 years is wig technology. It's exactly the same technology and it still looks terrible.
Are you watching Hacks?
I've watched series 1 and 2. I haven't seen series
It's really
3
good. And one of the great things they do with her, that Jean Smart, is she looks so spectacular and she takes her wig off.
Oh, yeah.
And when she does, she's a very elderly lady with very short hair with a little band around it to keep it down so she could put her wig on. It's a very touching performance. Very vulnerable performance.
I'm definitely going to watch it now. It's got a wig. Let's get into the correspondence. Abortion pill correspondence. First of all, we spoke about the unnecessary nature of the Louisiana abortion pill laws last week, which outlaw possessing abortion pills without a prescription, but they exempt pregnant women from the law, which I found weird. And obtaining a pregnancy using those abortion pills is illegal already in Louisiana. And so I found it strange, these laws. They seem duplicative and unnecessary. And Paula writes, the reason why there is a seeming contradiction in the Louisiana laws is because the focus of the law is not pregnant women. It's supposed to stop people poisoning women with abortion pills. Now, that didn't get much coverage in the media, so I had looked that up. And Paula's right. Apparently, the author of the proposal, State Senator Thomas Presley, has a sister who has slipped abortion pills by her husband without her knowledge. Now, if that's honestly the point of this law, then it seems a lot less awful than I thought it was last week. But once again, I doubt that's honestly the point of this law, because that also seems needlessly duplicative. Surely this would be covered by already existing poisons laws. Slipping someone medication they don't need and don't want surely is illegal already. But anyway, the point is we should at least present the law as it's meant to be presented by its proponent, which I just did. So thank you very much, Paula. That is useful. Bill, we've gotten yet again a whole swag of feedback on comedy songs, which Dave opened. I was going to say the biggest can of worms since your Queen comments, but it's actually bigger. It's actually bigger than the Queen comments. Yeah. It's huge. People are just going on and on over all that. Like there's just an endless list of comedy acts and novelty songs that we haven't mentioned. I'm not going to mention anymore because it's just going to give me another list to mention. And yes, I haven't mentioned any of the people who are part of the groups I've worked on, or because that feels a little bit tacky to me. So I'm not going to get into chaser group stuff, but I know that you wanted to say something about comedy songs or novelty songs, so I'll throw to you. And given that you're the music guy, I assume
to some extent, yeah. And people should know that I've written about music my whole career, and I've been a rock critic and things like that. And at the same time, I totally want to say when it comes to comedy, I definitely bow to your expertise.
That's all right.
You have some chops in that. And on the other hand, I think I was working in the yard and I was listening to you guys. And several times during that show, I said to myself, hold my beer, because I had something to contribute.
Well,
okay,
I'm holding the mineral water.
And all I want to do is it's something that I've had a little bit of interest in over the years. And I've never, as Sherlock Holmes would say, I've never published a monograph on the subject, but I have sort of thought it through.
Sure.
And all I was going to say, my contribution would just be, in my analysis, I come up with 4 sort of categories of humor when it comes to music.
Go for it.
Okay. Now, the most... in America, at least, there's this guy named Dr. Demento.
Okay.
And I don't know if he's well known in Australia, but he had this radio show that in the 70s and 80s played. And it was on these weird stations, and it'd be late at night, and you'd hear it, and it was otherworldly. And what it was a novelty song program. Dr. Demento, his name was Barry Hansen, and he dressed up in a funny beard and a hat and did pinwheels and things like this.
Okay.
And he just collected these songs. And these songs are deeply, deeply, deeply embedded in the American psyche. It doesn't matter who you are. Everyone knows these songs.
So
okay?
what night was he? Was he weekends?
It didn't matter. It was a syndicated show.
Okay.
They put it on. It was just at night, and you'd come across it. And when you're a kid, your head just exploded. So one song everyone knows probably is "They're Coming to Take Me Away." Ha ha.
Napoleon 14.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And just in case you don't know it, let me just play.
They're coming to take me away, ha ha. They're coming to take me away, ho ho, hee hee, ha ha. To the funny farm where life is beautiful all the time, and I'll be happy to see those nice young men in their clean white coats, and they're coming to take me away, ha ha.
Okay. Now
that's why I would call a novelty song.
That's one. And my point is that that's the first category.
Yeah.
And there's one other I just want to play you that I think anyone who was alive in America over the age of 10, beneath 40 knows this song. Sure. Okay, get this one.
Fish heads, roly-poly fish heads, eat them up, yum.
In the morning laughing, happy fish heads.
Well, that's just from my nightmares.
Exactly. No, these are the things that just kept going. And he and
Chipmunks, yeah?
no, see, that's not. It was these two guys,
okay.
and I'm glad you brought that up because one of them was named Billy Mooney, and he was the boy in Lost in Space, and he was a very famous child actor in the 60s and 70s, and he grew up and he did some other movies and stuff like this, but it's a great trivia question because, again, everyone knows who Billy Mooney is. He's sort of the equivalent of Opie on the Andy Griffith Show or something like this, an iconic child actor, okay? And the other interesting thing that I'd totally forgotten about until I was researching it for the show is that the actor Bill Paxton made the original video for it, which is very bizarre, which you could find online as well.
The original video for that fish
For
head
fish
song.
heads. Yeah.
Bill Paxton.
Yeah.
The movie star.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting?
Okay. We're playing that.
And the other thing you should know about Dr. Demento is that, of course, is where Weird Al Yankovic got his start.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. That's how I know
That's
the
where
name.
he came
Yeah,
from.
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
so
Okay.
that's number one. Okay, that is definitely one strain of
Yeah.
comedy and of things like this. Okay, so then secondly, there's another thing that are basically just comedians or comedic artists who do some songs.
Yeah.
Classic one, Steve Martin's King Tut.
Yeah.
Remember that one? Okay, that
Yeah.
was a huge song back in the day. Alan Sherman, who did, you guys mentioned, I think, Hello Mata, Hello Fada.
Yeah.
He has some really actually great things. And if you look up, he has a terrific song called If I Could Play the Piano. And he said he wrote it for Jimmy Durante.
Yeah.
It's a very clever song. But he's basically a comedian who had music in his act as a shtick.
When you say that, when you say a comedian doing a song, they're meant to be a funny song. They're not.
Yeah.
It's not like Eddie Murphy doing Party All the Time.
Oh, exactly.
Which was funny for different reasons.
Exactly. No, there's other things that are funny. These are, if I'm talking about pure comedy.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a big thing. And then there's other great things like you might be interested. I should find this for you. Bobby Kennedy singing Wild Thing.
Oh my God.
And I don't think it was Von Meter who did a famous thing on the Kennedys called The First Family, but someone did it. And the premise was he was running for president and his opponent had just recorded a song. So they needed Bobby Kennedy to do Wild Thing. And of course he did it in the heavy Massachusetts accent. Okay, I'll find that for you. Okay. Now, next, you have this thing you guys mentioned. I would classify a third thing of absurdism.
Yes.
That's where you get King Missile, you get Camper Van Beethoven, Take the Skinheads Bowling.
When Bill says King Missile, he's referring to detachable penis.
Detachable
presumably?
penis,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
And there's a whole sort of category of those. Sometimes the band always did absurdism. Sometimes they didn't. I'd almost put They Might Be Giants in that. Now, they're very high level. They're very arch. They're very funny. But they're not doing serious songs. Sometimes they get serious emotions out of the songs, but they're almost all self-conscious, self-referential, have bizarre, offshoots and stuff like this. They'll spell out words in the middle, and there's all sorts of clever little things. And I don't know if you know, but back then they did a thing where they did a song a day, and you could call this phone number,
I heard that is.
and they would do a song
The dial
every
a
day.
song. Yeah.
So when you're doing that, your quality is going down. But they were a big band for a while. But I would still classify them as sort of arch, self-referential, too clever by half sometimes, but basically based in absurdism. Okay. Final category, which is the one that I personally care a little bit more about, is when you have bands that are basically good bands. They do songs that are funny in one way or another, but they're actual rock songs. Okay, so a couple of examples. The Rolling Stones did a kind of mock country song called "Faraway Eyes." Back on Some Girls. That's very funny.
I guess that's Beatles. You Know My Name, Look Up My Number.
Terrific example. Even Bungalow Bill, Rocky Raccoon, Dead Skunk. Do you remember that song by Mr. Loudon Wainwright III?
I do. Yeah.
Dead Skunk in the Middle of the Road. And then there was a band called Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show who did the cover of the Rolling Stone, if you remember that song. And all their songs, people don't know this, were all written by Shel Silverstein. And he was the guy who wrote A Boy Named Sue.
Oh, okay.
And he was this comedic, and he wrote a very famous children's book called, I can't remember, but it's one of the best-selling children's book of all time. And he was this guy. He was a very interesting guy. He was an African-American guy. He was bald, very striking looking, kind of an almost looking like Isaac Hayes back in the day. And he was an associate of Hugh Hefner's. And he also wrote a lot for Playboy and did cartoons and stuff for Playboy. So crazy guy, Playboy illustrator, children's book writer, and he wrote all the songs for Dr. Hook and the Medicine Show, who had a pretty big career for 3 or 4 albums.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then and there were all sorts of other things. And there's one interesting subcategory I really like, which is funny songs about the record industry.
Okay.
So you have Pink Floyd's Have a Cigar.
Yeah.
We're so happy we can hardly count, talking about the record industry. Graham Parker has a hilarious song called Mercury Poisoning. His label was Mercury.
Okay.
And he had a funny line like, I have a dinosaur for a representative. He has a small brain and he refuses to learn.
Yeah.
So that's another one of my, sometimes you have sarcastic, funny songs.
I wouldn't say this is hilarious, but it's certainly satirical. In Australia, there's a quite famous one called Buy Me a Pony by Spiderbait, which from the 90s. Yeah, which is basically about being signed up with a record by a record label that then completely forgets about you and moves on to the next big act.
Yeah, that goes. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of those.
Yeah. That's
So basically, that's the way I would classify it, because it does get mixed up. It's hard to figure out how they all fit together. And I think you do have those different strains. And, like I said, me personally, I don't mind them. They're just, the arch ones aren't, detachable penis does nothing to me.
Sure.
I mean, it's just whatever. Sure. Comedians, depends whether the comedians are good or not. Novelty songs, Dr. Demento, are just part of my whatever, so I can't think about them clearly. And then, like I said, I kind of like it when some bands come up with these kind of nice, humorous rock songs.
Well, you've imposed some much needed structure on our musings.
Thank you.
And I am now going to close the book on this topic. so don't keep. I mean, look, you can write whatever you like in the comments, but I'm not going to read out any more stuff about.
And maybe
comedy
what I'll try to
songs
do
for a
is
while.
maybe I'll do a collection of YouTube links to the last category for people if they're interested.
Give me a whole list of YouTube links, Bill. You can find them in the homework, in the show notes, in the blurb, underneath the videos, and in fact on the audio podcast as well. Go have a look. You can see what Bill's got for you to listen to. That could be your listening. Bill could be your personal Dr. Demento from this podcast. Next correspondence on Alito flag. Jim asks, what about Alito's other flag scandal? Flying the appeal to heaven flag as beach house. Dog whistle the Christian nationalist. What's PEP's take on the impact of new apostolic reformation on American politics and democracy? Okay, so Jim's stealing my thunder a little bit there when he talks about the new apostolic reformation, but let's take a step back. Last PEP, we talked about Alito's first flag, the upside-down US flag that he was flying a few weeks, or his wife apparently was flying a few weeks after January 6th. We made that PEP just as the second flag story was breaking. That's why I tell you when we're recording these things, so you know the stories we're missing. I don't do it because it sounds cool, even though it does sound cool. So we didn't mention the second flag story for that reason, because it was only just breaking while we were recording. This second flag, was at his beach house, and it was photographed in 2023. And here's the photo right here. That is the white flag you're seeing there with the pine tree and the phrase "appeal to heaven" written on it. Now that flag's apparently not there at that beach house anymore, but people have laid this flag on top of the other flag because both those flags were seen at January 6th. Okay, so they go, oh, here's another example of Alito supporting Stop the Steal with flags, like this white pine tree flag. All right, to me, that's a big mistake. And let me tell you why. I think it's not representative at all of January 6th, that flag. There are a lot of flags at January 6th. That doesn't mean the flag is particularly representative of Stop the Steal. The upside down flag, the upside down American flag, was seen at George Floyd protests as well. Is anyone suggesting that when Mrs. Alito flew her upside down flag, she was supporting BLM? I don't think anyone's thinking that, because even though that flag was seen at BLM protests, it isn't synonymous with BLM protests. People fly upside down flags for all kinds of reasons, but a number of people flew it at January 6th, and this happened right after January 6th. So it makes sense that you would connect the upside down flag to January 6th for that reason, because these happened at the same time that the upside down flag was at least moderately well known as being part of January 6th, certainly amongst the January 6th participants. But this white flag flew 2 years after January 6th. So, correlation does not necessarily equal causation in this case, I feel. I don't see the connection to Stop the Steal. But let me tell you the history of that flag, and then you'll see where I'm coming from. That flag's called the Pine Tree flag. It goes back to the Revolutionary War. The British used to use white pine wood to make the masts of their ships. And so the British banned Americans from chopping large white pine trees down in America. One American was arrested for doing that in 1771, and that prompted a riot, the Pine Tree Riot, which was apparently inspiration for the Boston Tea Party, hence the flag with a pine tree on it. Fine. These days, there's something it's much better known for than the Pine Tree Riot, and that is, or Stop the Steal for that matter, and that is religious connotations. Because in 2013, a South Carolina preacher, Dutch Sheets, popularized the use of that flag to represent the new Apostolic Reformation. It's a far-right religious movement that believes the government should be based on Christian values and elected officials should commit to live and govern based on biblical, constitutional, and federalist principles. There's a quote. Sheets said, "Rally to the flag. God has resurrected it for such a time as this. Wave it outwardly, wear it inwardly, appeal to heaven daily for a spiritual revolution that will knock out the Goliaths of our day." Hence, appeal to heaven. That is why Mike Johnson had that flag hanging outside his office until very recently. Because he was into, not because he's into January 6th, it's because he was into religion. In particular, hardcore right religion. So sure, some Stop the Steal guys might have been part of the religious movement and vice versa. In fact, Dutch Sheets himself was into Stop the Steal, but this flag is about religion, not January 6th. And that religion that I described sounds right down Alito's alley to me. So I can understand why he'd be flying that flag. And it's not just him. Leonard Leo also flies the pine tree flag outside his house. Leonard Leo, for those who don't know, is the person responsible for Justice Alito. He's the guy behind the right-wing push, especially the right-wing religious push onto the Supreme Court. Someone asked him why he flew that flag. This is what he said. 1. It is the flag of the First Navy of the US, which was privately funded by General George Washington. For me, flying that flag symbolizes civic duty and philanthropy towards one's country. 2. As someone who lives on the water, I like naval flags. And as a history buff, I occasionally fly those and about a half dozen other early American flags. 3. As a resident of Maine, the pine tree state, I like pine trees. Now, I find that completely disingenuous, but regardless, I don't think Alito should have to recuse from any cases because of his religious beliefs, which is what we're talking about here. By the way, sorry, do you want to jump in there?
When you're done, I have 2 points to say.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just finish off this thought and then you can jump in there. I should say that the Melina convinced me he should recuse himself for the first flag, the upside down Stop the Steal flag. But my view is the only case he should recuse himself from is the January 6th defendants case, which is about the actual January 6th defendants. I think he's a conflict with respect to January 6th and only with respect to January 6th. I don't think his conflict extends to Trump generally. I don't think he should recuse himself from Trump's immunity claims, for instance, because that's not just about January 6th. That's about everything Trump does. I think the Dems have been a bit ridiculous on this. I think Tim Kaine said that Alito must recuse more broadly on cases involving Trump. Mazie Hirono just went nuts. She said the more he recuses himself on just about anything to do with MAGA, Trump, DACA, any of these things, I'd be happy. DACA? DACA's an immigration case. What's that got to do with anything to do with January 6th? That's just insanity. But to me, there's a fair bit of opportunism about this. But I do feel that he should recuse himself from the January 6th case of the upside down flag, because the upside down flag and the pine tree, to me, that's just freedom of religion. What do you reckon?
Okay, 2 things. One, I really disagree with you on the second point because the thing is, Supreme Court justices should not be splitting hairs about, oh yeah, I'm flying the same flag as Leonard Leo, far, far, far right person, and Mike Johnson, crazy far right person, but they're doing it for these specific religious reasons and I'm doing it. They shouldn't be doing that. And frankly, he shouldn't even really be. Why do you have to fly religious flags outside your house? It's very, you know what I mean?
You don't have to, that's for sure.
Remember that line in the 60s or whatever it was, defining deviancy down?
Yeah.
And I think we're defining deviancy down. I can't imagine flying an American flag upside down. Like, it's just, you're not supposed to do that. I mean, I guess it's a sign of distress.
Yeah.
Like, I have this vague idea that if I were on a ship, a pirate ship, and something was wrong, I would be allowed to fly it upside down and people would say, oh my God, someone's in trouble. Yeah. But, you grow up in America and you're just not supposed to burn the flag. You're not supposed to let it touch the ground. You're not supposed to get it dirty. We had people like the first George Bush, running all around. People are burning the flag and passing this completely unconstitutional law that said you can't burn the flag, which you should be able to do. I personally wouldn't do it. It's obviously protected speech, but you're not supposed to do it, right? And so the very idea that a Supreme Court justice would do this thing that A, you're not supposed to do in any case, and B, that obviously has, references to this terrible, and people say, oh, well, it has a little bit of January 6th. Yeah, it has some relevance to the worst thing that's happened in America in the last 10 or 20 years. And then secondly, this religious thing, it's very, very disturbing. He's aligning himself with these religious fanatics and then, proudly displaying over his house. Supreme Court justices aren't supposed to do that. And you would have just thought any Supreme Court justice, the minute they saw that, they'd start yelling at their housekeeper, their wife, or their husband or whoever and say, take that freaking thing down right now. Do you not understand what being a Supreme Court? So he deserves everything he gets. He's become increasingly unhinged over the years. I mean, it just feels he's so shrill these days. He's so dishonest about it. He's intellectually dishonest. He's not forthcoming. He's aligning himself with like the Wall Street Journal and talking to, politically friendly people about it. And I find it incredibly disturbing. And again, I really want to stress, you're not supposed to do any of that. And now it should feel like people are, it's about this and it's kind of about this pine tree. It's like, you shouldn't be holding flags up that have any association at all with political people, particularly insane, crazy, disturbing, violent people. Okay. So I guess that the second thing really quickly is, did you see the Washington Post story about this, about the first incident where they saw it 2 years ago and they went and they interviewed them about it. And then they said, we decided not to publish anything about it at the time because they said, it was Mrs. Alito. And we decided it wasn't of news value.
I heard about it. He says that's a weird decision.
You think?
Yes.
Just for the record, because not everyone is a reporter here, but if you go find this story and don't write about it in 2 years, it becomes the biggest story of a week.
Yeah.
It's bad when you say, we had that story 2 years ago. Yeah. I mean, you'd get yelled at.
Okay, let me ask you then, because I love that. I love that how forward you are with your fearless views, and so I just want to interrogate them a bit. Okay. I think we can all agree. I mean, people who listen to this podcast know that I'm no fan of Alito generally. Right. Like he's the justice that I've got the biggest problem with by quite a long way. In fact, he's
worse than Thomas.
Yeah, very much so. Okay. I think Thomas is intellectually.
That's a hot take.
I think Thomas is intellectually honest. Like I don't necessarily agree with him, but I think that he stands by his principles. Like he follows them through. He doesn't go one way and then go a different way when it suits him another time. He is quite consistent, and he's consistently extremely conservative, and his views are consistently not views that I share. But Alito just flips around all over the place depending on what the Republican Party says. Like Thomas is not like that. And so I have much more respect for Thomas than I do for Alito. I mean, I wouldn't nominate Thomas, but I think for someone who represents a different ideological group than me as their judge, I don't have a huge problem with Thomas. I just disagree with him. Okay. Whereas Alito, I just don't have any respect for at all. I think he's just a terrible justice, by any standards.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
And I agree with you that as time has gone on, he's become more unhinged, and there's been more acts which he shouldn't have undertaken.
Yeah, it's disturbing. I mean, this is just, I can't, back in the day, William Douglas he was a little crazy and a little partisan and strident, but it's hard to think of any justice that is this strident and sort of this careering and doing these things.
Yeah, I agree with that. But I was just going to say, like, it's one thing to say, I take your point, that he shouldn't be doing any of these things. He shouldn't be flying any flags. Right. I get that. And I don't think it's great, these flying flags. But the question is about recusal, not about whether he's a bad justice, right? So what should he be recusing himself from because of him flying a religious flag?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Yeah. I mean, I don't have a weapon of mass destruction. Sure. I really don't. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, my second question then is on a slightly different note. This is a point that's been made repeatedly this week by the right. and that is the double standard point. And what they're referring to, and this is not just a what about, because I think this is actually a legitimate point. I say this because I made this at the time. But the point that has been made a number of times is that Ruth Bader Ginsburg in July 2016 told the New York Times, I can't imagine what this place would be. I can't imagine what the country would be with Donald Trump as our president. For the country, it could be 4 years. For the court, it could be, I don't even want to contemplate that. She said if her late husband were around to see a Trump presidency, he would have said, now it's time for us to move to New Zealand. Then a few days later, she did another interview with CNN, and she said he has no consistency about him. He says whatever comes into his head at the moment. He really has an ego. How has he gotten away with not turning over his tax returns? Now, she apologized for those comments, all of them, but she never accused herself from a Trump case. In particular, and this is the one which I, at the time, said she should recuse herself from, she didn't recuse herself from the case about him releasing his tax returns. And I said, if you've gone on the record saying, I think he should release his tax returns, you shouldn't be in judgment on a case determining whether he should be releasing his tax returns. Like you've prejudged the case. And so I said that at the time. But what's your view on that?
Well, I got to say, I have issues with her as well for all sorts of reasons. But I have to say, I think I make a distinction in that because for two reasons. One, there's an aspect of it that I feel as a journalist, because one time I was on the ABC and I was talking about something, and the host, the reader asked me, said, well, that sounds a little strident, or you sound a little whatever. And I had to say, it's kind of odd because I'm really not partisan. I don't favor one side or the other. I'm happy to criticize both sides. But when there's certain things that come on and you say, this is wrong. I mean, you have to be able to say this is wrong. And so Trump has transcended and broken all these norms and laws and everything else. And I don't like the idea of people not being able to say this is wrong. He's a bad person. He's done bad things. That's not being biased. It's stating facts.
But what about if you're a Supreme Court justice?
Well, but on the other hand,
flying flags?
But I think that you're allowed to say, I think, Clarence Thomas is allowed to say, I don't think affirmative action is right. That doesn't mean he can't judge an affirmative action case. But I agree with you. I have issues with her. I think she is a little, but I do point, you have to admit, as you said, that she did apologize.
She did.
There is this tendency that when people overspeak on certain things, they do apologize, but there is this infection on the right where they never, ever apologize. They never back down. And they just, they have this insolent way of just pressing on.
And just to be clear, while I didn't like her doing any of those interviews, I wasn't of the view that she should recuse herself from all Trump cases.
Yeah.
I just thought the tax returns one was just a step too far. That was my personal view. Yeah. But anyway, I'm going to skip past the rest of the correspondence because we spent enough time on this stuff. Let's get into the main content. Polling. Now, I know that you had a few polls which you wanted to...
Oh, yeah. Can we discuss a couple? Okay.
Yeah,
and there's one in particular. The polls are just so disturbing this year. They're just so crazy. They don't seem to make any sense. I think a lot of people, their nerve endings are so... exercised in any case, and you see these polls and your head explodes and your skin's on fire and you go, what the hell is going on with this? Okay. So there is a poll this week that I think is interesting because it's, in one way, it's a poll that explains all the other polls. Okay. So, and it's from The Guardian. I forget the other thing, but the partner, but
Harris polling.
Is that it? Okay. Yeah. Harris. Sorry. Let me go back here. Okay. So this is from The Guardian. This is a poll of Americans. 55% believe the economy is shrinking. This is the U.S. economy.
Yeah.
And 56% think that the U.S. is experiencing a recession.
Yes.
Okay, now, as most of us know, I think that neither of those things are true. In fact, the exact opposite is true and has been true for several years.
The average growth under Biden has been higher than the average growth under Trump and Obama.
Yeah.
The second term of Obama.
The economy is going gangbusters. I mean, it's crazy. The stock market is going nuts. Unemployment is very low. Obviously, inflation was a problem. Some prices are still high, et cetera, et cetera. Everything else is growing. Okay, next data point. 49% believe the S&P 500 stock market index is down for the year. It went up 24% last year and is up 12% so far this year. 49% believe that unemployment is at a 50-year high, when it's actually at a 50-year low.
Yeah.
Okay. So obviously, this poll explains all the other polls, because if you have this incredibly misinformed electorate, this electorate that is famously unhappy, peevish, ready to lash out at the sitting president, notwithstanding the fact that he's seems to be running against a complete maniac who had a calamitous presidency 4 years ago. So I think that's pretty interesting, A. Now, B, it also tells me something else, which is the Democrats have a messaging problem.
Yes.
And I keep hearing really smart people on podcasts saying, oh, it kind of goes beyond messaging, but it kind of doesn't. I mean, someone is really falling down. And once you dig down in these poll numbers, they're surprisingly high even for Democrats, that even Democrats aren't getting the good news. Yeah. I don't envy the Democrats having to try to get information across in this chaotic media information environment we're in. Still, I think that really says a lot about the incompetency. Now, and there's all sorts of other ancillary polls that are really disturbing.
Before you go on to them,
Sure.
let me just make one quick point, just to support what you just said.
Sure.
Because I agree with you that I think there is a messaging issue here. And the reason I agree with you is because all the reasons and excuses people come up with have a very, like, they talk about the internet, they talk about social media, they talk about this, that, and the other. But my response to all of them is, but those people were happy under Trump. Like the economic polling under Trump was quite positive. So how did he manage to get a message out to these people, but Biden isn't? It's got to be a messaging issue because the economy is objectively better now than it was under Trump. Now, there is one proviso there, which is the inflation issue, which I'm going to get to eventually. But the fact is, at least on these categories that you just described, economic growth, stock market, unemployment, there is just no doubt that it is better now than it has been before at times when people were genuinely more positive. So you just go, well, what's the difference? It just has to be messaging. Anyway, you're going.
And this happens a lot. I mean, I just think way back. I mean, again, I'm old enough. I can remember as Reagan approached his second term. There were all these times when the incumbents were way down in the dust, and they came back. When I was growing up, it was typical for presidents not to have successful presidencies. We had a whole bunch: JFK, Lyndon Johnson, Nixon, Carter. I mean, Reagan was a breath of fresh air in the fact that he was a successful two-term president who actually had his administration follow up with his vice presidency, which is an extraordinary achievement by any standard. Clinton almost pulled that off. Yeah. And I could go into all this, but there's been a whole bunch of other polls about how people are moving to the Republican Party away from the Democratic Party, how people think that Biden doesn't have the mental and physical health to be president, but Trump does, that Trump is better and all these ridiculous things he was patently and obviously and demonstrably bad at when he was president. So I won't go into all those. And then you have a whole other thing where you have Biden. He's not doing so well in the important states he has to do in the upper Midwest. Okay. But he's doing very poor, doing worse in the states south of the so-called Mason-Dixon line.
Yes.
Okay. Where I think what the average was 6 points worse in states like Georgia and Arizona, maybe 3 points in the other ones. Now, the one thing I do want to say is that people are always sour on the incumbent. They come back. Trump has always had this ceiling of people. He has a hard time getting above 44, 45, 46%. Given the stakes in the election, you got to assume that most of those people will, quote unquote, come home, as they say, to the Democrats. He lost 4 years ago. And ever since then, it's been chaotic and crazy, and all those things I think are going to matter. Okay. Now, I just want to point out the most disturbing thing of all this, okay? Which is that this is the big problem. Okay. This is from Dan Balch, who's a very smart guy in the Washington Post, okay? But it just shows you what a crazy world we're living in, that this really smart guy says this. Biden campaign officials say, quote, Trump amnesia – a phenomenon of people having a too rosy memory of Trump's tumultuous 4 years in office, as well as the economic downturn in the coronavirus era, is one reason the former president scored so much better. Their strategy is to change those perceptions through advertising, messaging, and campaigning. To which I say, really?
Yeah.
After 3.5 years, you're going to stop. Maybe we should do something with advertising, messaging, and campaigning.
I feel like they've already tried that.
And it just shows you that they just want – there's another thing in American politics where the right is very good at, that the minute if you try to criticize, here we are playing the blame game, looking into the past. Let's talk about the future. You're just diverting attention. And if there was ever any president that you could do the blame game with, and I've always said this, that the first time he was in office, he should have been talking about coronavirus deaths, people dying in the streets. In North Dakota, let's talk about the death rate in North Dakota. Let's talk about the death rate in Florida. Let's talk about the death rate and all, just go on the offensive. Let's talk about the Trump deficit. Did I mention the deficit? Do you know what I call it the Trump deficit. Have you heard about the deficit? That's what Trump would say. He'd say, have you heard about the Trump deficit? I call it the Trump deficit. Did you know people were calling it that? It's the Trump deficit. It's 10 billion. It's 11 trillion. It's 12. He would just make up numbers. And Biden didn't do any of that stuff. And the Democrats sometimes are just very good at, well, we're not going to talk about that. People understand that, and they really don't. So anyway, that is a scare. When I read this sentence, my blood ran cold. Their strategy is to change those perceptions through advertising messaging. Okay, that's really good that we're doing that 6 months out from the election. And they should have been doing it at the same time. I think that's all I have to say on that.
Okay, I've got a few polls that are going to shed some more light on what you're talking about right there. This is not about the simple top line stuff. This is getting a bit deeper. The two in particular I'm quite interested in. Nate Cohen has done an analysis of less engaged voters from the New York Times Siena polls. And now I've talked at length because I think that this is a key group in this election coming up, that Biden does badly with less engaged Democratic voters than with highly engaged Democratic-leaning voters. So let me give you some numbers. If Dem-leaners voted in 2020 and 2022, 99% of them support Biden now. If Dem-leaners voted in 2020 but not 2022, 75% of them support Biden now. If Dem-leaners did not vote in either 2020 or 2022, then 74% of them support Biden now. So the only the Democratic leaners who unanimously support Biden are the ones who voted in both elections. The ones who didn't vote in one or both of those elections, about 3/4 of them. He's lost a quarter of them, right? Now, you might think, like you expressed a hope before when you were talking, you were saying, well, they might come home. That's what a lot of them say. They say, these people aren't informed. As they become informed, as they pay attention, as they tune in, you hear about people not tuning in yet. As they tune in, they'll come home. Maybe, maybe not, because these people are different to the other people. It's not just that they don't vote all the time. There are other differences from them. Less engaged Democratic-leaning voters are less likely to consider themselves liberal. They also get their political information from different sources than the more regular Democratic-leaning voters do. They're much less likely to say abortion and democracy are their most important issues, which is what the Democrats are hoping are people's most important issues. They're much more likely to say the economy is their most important issue. They overwhelmingly say the economy is poor or only fair. Overwhelmingly. Let's put some numbers on that. How often do you pay attention to the news? Those who say always or most of the time, 89 to 90% of them support Biden. Those who say pay attention about half of the time, 82% of them support Biden. Those who say they pay attention some of the time, 74% of them support Biden. Those who say they pay attention never, 69% of them support Biden. All of those are Democrat-leaning voters we're talking about.
Right.
Okay? So now you might go, well, then as soon as they're forced to pay attention because of the election campaign, then they'll come on board, won't they? What's their news source? Those who say national media, 92% of the Democrats support Biden. Those who say local media, 81% of those Democrats support Biden. Those who say social media, 72% of those Democrats support Biden. Yeah. So yeah, they might come on board while they might tune in through social media, and then maybe they're not going to join Biden. Maybe they'll join Trump. Even if they start to pay more attention, it won't necessarily fix things because they're a different group of people. So that would be making Dems nervous. That's the first poll I wanted to point out. The second poll is about the economy. And this sheds some light, I think, on that Guardian poll. First of all, I'll just say the swing state numbers because this was a swing state poll. This is from the Cook Political Report, GS Strategy Group. Trump was +5 in swing states with the third parties. Without the third parties, he was +3. I'll go through the states. Arizona, Trump was +4 with the third parties. Without the third parties, he was +1. He was +4 in Georgia with the third parties. Without the third parties, he was +3. He was +3 in Michigan. Without the third parties, he was +2. In Nevada, he was +8. Without the third parties, he was +9. In North Carolina, he was +8. Without the third parties, he was +7. In Pennsylvania, he was +3. Without the third parties, he was +3. And Wisconsin, he was even with Biden. And he was even without the third parties as well. Okay, that's just top line. Let's get into the details here. What are the markers of a strong economy? They asked people in the swing states. 6% picked the stock market. 13% picked low unemployment. 9% picked household income. 54% said the cost of living. So their definition of a good economy is cost of living. And it's possible that maybe that poisons everything else. That if they're angry about inflation, in their head they're thinking, well, everything's shit, so unemployment's shit, so stock market's shit, so everything's shit, because that's their definition of a good economy. That's not just Democrats, that's swing state people overall. What can Biden do about inflation, they were asked. 59% of voters, 59% think President Biden has some or a lot of control over inflation and rising costs.
Yeah.
So they're blaming him. They're saying he can fix it, and he's not. And that to me is your ball game, essentially. They care about inflation primarily when it comes to the economy, and they think Biden can control inflation, but he isn't. And so I think that informs a lot of what we're hearing there in those other economic polls.
And obviously, this is something they knew was coming. People were worried inflation was coming, and it's something that they could have sort of inoculated themselves about.
They could have tried. They didn't.
They could have said,
Yeah.
right. They could have said, hey, look, it's going to be a rough couple of years, but this is what's going to happen. And they didn't.
And that's why there's this Trump nostalgia, I feel, because 62% approve of how Trump dealt with economic issues. They say 56% are optimistic about the cost of living dropping in a second Trump term, whereas 39% are optimistic about the cost of living dropping in a second Biden term. This is amazing, this number. This is my, oh my God number. 50% to 46%. 50% for Trump, 46% for Biden are optimistic about the cost of healthcare dropping.
Yeah.
How could anyone think that Trump is going to be positive for the cost of healthcare?
Yeah.
Biden has so many subsidies going on for healthcare. And there's an enormous number of subsidies. They all go away as soon as Biden goes away. The cost of healthcare is going to rise. Whatever you think of their economic agendas, the cost of healthcare is absolutely, definitely going to rise under Trump. I'll tell you that right now. Yeah. So it's because Biden spends so much money subsidizing healthcare. What about other issues? And this is interesting as well. 73% ranked inflation, cost of living as one of their top 3 issues. 52% named immigration, border security as one of their top 3 issues. 35% named abortion, reproductive rights as one of their top 3 issues. Even amongst women, abortion was their 3rd top issue. It was 42% compared to 73% inflation, 48% immigration. When asked what worried them more, Biden setting economic policy or Trump setting policy for abortion rights, 55% said they were more worried about Biden handling the economy than they were about Trump setting policy on abortion. Wow. They're 55% to 45%. Yeah. And when asked about immigration, by the way, Biden setting immigration versus Trump setting abortion, you had 53% of voters saying they were more concerned about Biden setting immigration policy. 47% said they were more concerned about Trump setting abortion policy. What about democracy? The democracy line. 41% of voters, swing states, said they were confident that America would remain a democracy if Trump won the second term.
41%.
41%. They just don't care.
Yeah.
They don't care.
Yeah.
Just keep our costs low.
Yeah.
And then finally, the Trump trials, 53% said that Biden's age is more concerning to them than Trump's legal issues. 47% said Trump's legal issues are more concerning than Biden's age. So there you go. So that's a whole bunch of depressing polls if you're a Biden supporter. But I think that informs those other polls. It's essentially comes down to inflation. It just comes down to inflation.
Yeah, and immigration. Let's be fair.
Those
are both those things. They really. Bill Clinton was so good at this. I think we've joked. I don't mean to joke, but I think I've mentioned this before. There was this guy named Billy Ray Spector or something like this, who was a mentally disadvantaged person who was in an Arkansas prison. And Clinton, I think he refused to commute his death sentence, and he was executed even though he was mentally impaired. And that's just something they did. They just said, you know what, I'm not going to get into a death penalty argument, because back then the death penalty was another wedge issue. And there is one other aspect of it. And I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but I lived in San Francisco, I lived in Chicago, I lived in Washington, and then at a certain point, for family reasons, I went back to Arizona. And the view of the culture back then, it's very anti-democratic. Anti-democrat. And it's just that the right is so good over the years. Back in the day, it was they said the Democratic Party was the party of homosexuals, profligate spenders, and criminals, or something like that. And even people who weren't really right-wing, it's just culturally, the Democrats found themselves out of step culturally. And they weren't out of state culturally, but they were portrayed to be by a very efficient right-wing machine, which includes not just Fox News, but right-wing radio stations and now, of course, you have all sorts of places. And so there is this thing that this is kind of, they're reaping the whirlwind of having neglected that for so long. Even though it's very difficult, because what do you do when someone, I don't want to use the word, but the word for homosexual that begins with an F, it's, when someone's attacking you, what all they can say is, but first of all, don't use that word. Secondly, there's nothing wrong. Thirdly, there's people in your family who are like that. Fourthly, I thought you were Christian. Why are you persecuting these people? Fifthly, what do you even care? You say you're a right-wing libertarian type person. Aren't you interfering with someone else's, blah, blah, blah. And you get into this weird long argument about it, whereas that word, that the F word sort of lingers over the conversation. And so I take the point that it's a very difficult battle to hold. And it was surprising to me when gay marriage was ultimately held by the Supreme Court. That was an unthinkably quick resolution for something which probably cost, another one of the things that probably cost Al Gore the election the year 2000, particularly in the state of Ohio. So there is
John Kerry in 2004 as well.
Yeah, that's another good example. So anyway, so that's just another part of the explanation, is that this has been something that's been a long time coming.
Sure. I was going to say also there is an inbuilt special element of this election, which I think we should acknowledge. And I can't claim this. This is from Lee Drutman, not me, but who's a really good political scientist. But Lee Drutman has spoken about two perennial biases, or there's more than two, but in particular, he was focusing on two perennial biases in election. One is a negativity bias for the now, which is people focus on what's negative right now, generally speaking. And another is the nostalgia bias for the past. And usually what happens is the incumbent has to overcome the problems of the negativity bias, the desire for change because of a negativity bias, with the benefits of incumbency, which are many. But the last two elections, the last one and this one, have had a special aspect to them, which is the incumbent hasn't just been fighting one bias, they've been fighting two biases. Because in 2020, Joe Biden represented the nostalgia. He represented the Obama administration. And he also represented change because he was the antidote for the negativity bias at the time. Now, it's the opposite. Donald Trump represents nostalgia bias. Normally, the challenger does not represent nostalgia because they're new. But in this case, the challenger is old. They're the previous president. So nostalgia bias favors him. Yeah. And the negativity bias also favors him. So both 2020 and 2024, the incumbent has had a tough task of overcoming more bias than you would normally have to overcome as an incumbent.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I think that's definitely true. And I think that my point goes a little bit farther because we're making these equivalencies, and you think about the condition of society at the end of the Clinton administration, and you think of the condition of the society at the end of the Obama administration.
Yeah.
Okay. And at the end of the Trump administration, we were like one of those stunt guys in a movie who've been lit on fire and we're running around. And you can't, when you look back at the end of the Obama administration, you had prices were low, gas prices were low. He rescued the economy. The deficit was low. He'd killed Osama bin Laden. He'd done all this stuff. And yet still he got replaced by someone who's, and he introduced healthcare.
Yeah.
And the same with Clinton. Clinton had taken the deficit down to zero. Yeah. He kept the country out of wars for 8 years. And obviously he had his problem with Monica Lewinsky, but it does seem like it is this selective thing that, the condition of the country when Trump left office compared to the condition the other two most recent Democratic presidents left office were completely night and day.
That is absolutely true. All I would say is that we should remember, and it's, at the time, I don't think I appreciated it so much, but in hindsight, I appreciate it more. Trump was more popular than I remember in his third year. Like before it all turned to shit, before COVID, before the George Floyd protest, before all that kind of stuff. At the beginning of, like, if you look at the polls not now, 4 years ago, but 4 years ago, January and December 2019 and January 2020, Trump was damn near 50% approval, which at this point in time just seems unimaginable.
That's a fair point. Yeah.
Yeah. Like he actually, I've never been a big Trump supporter, so you'll be amazed to hear, but you just need to acknowledge that he was more popular than Obama was at the same point in time. He was definitely more popular than Obama was at the same point in time. So, it's just something that we should acknowledge. But on that note, by the way, I get comments every now and then. As you know, I read the comments. I get comments every now and then from people who think when I'm giving you all this bad news from a Democratic point of view, people think that's what I want. People think that I'm telling that I go on like this because I love Trump, right? And they go, "Don't you realize how bad Trump would be?" And look, if you watch Play America and you listen to Pep, I'm not actually a Trump supporter. Like my politics is weird. It's heterodox. The people in American politics who most closely represent my politics are never Trump Republicans. Essentially, those guys, they're like Dispatch. Yeah, like those guys are the guys who actually most represent me, but they don't really. But they're closer than anyone else. The fact is, I'm not a Trump supporter, and I'm not looking forward to Trump being president. But my job is to tell you what I think is the truth, and I'm not going to bullshit you, and I'm not going to be so deluded as to cheerlead for things that I want to happen. And in fact, half the time I don't even tell you what I want to happen because I don't think it's really relevant. I just think it's my job to tell you, to give you you can ignore my opinions. You can think I got no idea, and I probably don't. But I'm not going to lie to you. Let's put it that way. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway.
Okay, what next?
The next thing is the trial. I know you.
Oh, good.
Talk
Yeah.
about with that.
Yeah, let's talk about the let's talk about the trial. It's probably going to it's going to go to the jury probably on Tuesday night. Okay, in America, right? Which is going to be Wednesday, noon our time. Yeah. And there's going to be closing arguments. Apparently, it's going to be 3 hours each. It's very interested in New York State, apparently. I did not know this, that the defense goes first and then the prosecution.
That's a bit weird, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I mean, generally you think
should go last.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's going to be super, super interesting. And I think there's a couple things I just wanted to talk about. So everyone seems to think, all the analysts I listen to, who I respect their opinions, and who seem pretty even-sided, say that the prosecution did a pretty good job, the defense didn't do that good of a job, but hey, that was the cards they were dealt.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair enough to say. The one thing, obviously we know that there's these quote-unquote misdemeanors, but if you do these misdemeanors, falsify your business records in services of another crime, that's a felony. You don't have to prove that other crime. You just have to show there was this other crime involved. Yeah. There's a lot of discussion about the thing, did you intend to do that other crime?
Yeah.
Okay? So then you get into a whole thing, well, what does it mean that he intended to do this? Did he intend to violate campaign finance laws? Did he intend to violate tax laws?
Yeah.
So you get into that rabbit hole. Now, if you really read carefully some of the stuff. It says the falsification of business records with an intent to commit, aid in the commission of, or conceal the commission. Okay? So when you parse it down to that, it's saying with an intent to commit or with falsification with business records to aid in the commission of or conceal the commission of. So there's going to be some real parsing there. Do you have to intend to do it or just to aid in the commission of or to just commit this other crime? So there's going to be all that weird parsing, and this really wasn't discussed much in the trial. So it's all going to come down to how the judge reads what you call the charges to the jury. So I think we should – it's really hard to make any predictions because of that. Okay, So I have the faintest idea. There's one other thing I want to talk about that I just love. That I don't know, did you see the White House Plumbers series on HBO a while back?
No.
It's kind of funny. It had Woody Harrelson and this other guy, and they played Howard Hunt and G. Gordon Liddy. And it was kind of funny because it did capture the low-level buffoonery of the White House plumbers during that era, which is what the Nixon people all deserved and stuff like that. And so that kind of reminded me of this. And I just wanted to remind people, if you haven't been following the trial, just some of the great little tidbits that came under. So first of all, Michael Cohen came under Trump's orbit because he had bought a bunch of condos in his buildings and he got to know him and he did this legal work and Trump stiffed him on it. Okay? So Trump was refusing to pay his legal bills and something happened and he ended up being the personal lawyer to Donald J. Trump at the Trump organization. Okay?
A beautiful relationship was formed.
Okay? So that's really nice. So that's how that thing was begun. And as a brief tangent, one of the things that drives me crazy, and I'll get to this in a second, is Michael Cohen's background. A lot of this didn't come out, okay? Because he is sort of a low-level thug in certain ways. And he's also a high-level thug in certain other ways, so I'll get to that. But anyway, he comes under Trump's orbit. So Trump should not have been hiring him as a lawyer because he's basically a criminal, okay? But he did. So then secondly, amidst all the other stuff with Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels and such like this, it's very, very obvious, and it's among the most damning evidence that they made this deal to pay Stormy Daniels this $130,000, and what they were trying to do was delay it until the election, and then they weren't going to follow through with the deal. Okay, so that's what's the word? It's completely demonstrable evidence that they weren't concerned about Melania Trump or his family. They were just concerned about the election. Okay, just positive. That's the word I was looking for.
All I would say about that, and I keep on putting this disclaimer in because I think it's such a critical disclaimer, is that's if you believe Michael Cohen.
Oh, right.
Because that's coming from him.
Right.
Yeah. But yes, absolutely. Yes.
But still, no, but I think it's true, though, that that's a really good point. But that's why it hit a crescendo at that point. And that's why he had to set up his fake company to pay her the money and stuff like this, because they'd said, hey, look, you can't delay us anymore. And that's what, so there's some other circumstantial evidence that it had reached this point of, hey, you have to pay us or we're going to broadcast this story. And then the final tidbit, okay, so you have Trump stiffing Cohen, and they have Trump and Cohen trying to stiff Stormy Daniels.
Yes.
And then the third most delicious thing, if you really follow this carefully, is that if you remember, he had to be reimbursed by Trump for the $130,000. They had to double it to take care of his tax obligations.
Yes.
Because when you add up all the taxes. So he said, look, I'll do the money, but you got to cover me when it comes to taxes. So they said, okay, we'll do that. And then there was this whole fight they were having because he hadn't gotten the bonus he expected. Okay, so Trump was stiffing him on the bonus. I think he was supposed to get $150,000 and he only got $50,000. Okay, so Cohen was beside himself about that. There's a lot of evidence about that. Okay, and then finally, there was this other $50,000, okay? And that went to this vendor who did some online digital polling for them and stuff like this. And Cohen had said, oh, you stiffed that guy. He's breathing down my neck. You owe me $50,000 for that. Plus you have to cover the taxes on that, okay? So they said, okay, fine, we'll do that. And then he didn't give the guy the whole $50,000. He just gave him $20,000 apparently. So he basically stole $30,000 for Trump there.
Yeah, but remember, for those who listened to PEP 2 weeks ago, Cohen also threw in a boxing glove.
Right, the boxing glove, the ultimate fighter guy, right? No, I know you guys were talking about that, but it's part of this pattern that outside of all this other stuff, they're just walking around. I mean, they don't even rise to the level to the Sopranos. Just these buffoonish, weirdos just stealing penny ante. Here's this alleged billionaire screwing people over, and then the guy, instead of saying "screw you," said, "Oh, I get a job with this guy," and then and that was the start of a beautiful relationship.
I'll tell you another element about this that I find revealing, and that is Cohen, in a way, I mean, like you say, he's like a full-on criminal, but he reminds me a little bit, at least in part of this trial, of Hunter Biden, in that he's just trying to make some money wherever he can. However, trying to leverage whatever connection he's got to Trump. In particular, in 2017, 2018, he took no money from Trump because he was establishing a consultancy where he was getting paid millions of dollars to do nothing because he just described himself as the personal lawyer to Donald Trump. And he had 6 corporate clients who paid him a total of $4 million in a year to do nothing but, inverted commas, consult, which meant nothing. And that to me is very Hunter Biden. And it really sheds some light on the Hunter Biden situation, which we've been attuned to hearing sort of faux righteousness about Hunter Biden screwing people over for influence peddling, etc. And what did he get for that money and stuff? And he said, well, Michael Cohen gave them nothing for that $4 million. $4 million from 6 people in a year. Hunter Biden dreams of getting that kind of money. Hunter Biden was getting about $1 million a year as the vice president's son, right? With a much closer relationship than Michael Cohen had with Trump. And yet Michael Cohen was getting 4 times as much for doing also F all. And you just go, okay, well, that sheds some light in the world in which we're talking about with this sleazy influence peddling, where people don't necessarily give you anything. They just rip you off for access, inverted commas, access, which just means you can own me, so a person who knows the president or the vice president, and I'll give you nothing from that, but I'll just take your money. And there's a lot of money out there that you can get from that. And Michael Cohen demonstrates it because in this trial. So anyways, I just thought I'd throw that out there. Do you have more?
Just one other thing about the trial.
Keep
just
going.
Really briefly, there was this little fill-up. There was a little frisson that went through the media circles covering the trial when Michael Cohen started talking about the media people that he spoke to frequently. Yes. And if you look it up, there's a nice story on CNN about this. And he said, "Oh yeah, I talked to Katie Tur. She's an MSNBC host who came to prominence covering the Trump campaign back in 2016 in a very dogged way." And Maggie Haberman. Okay. And I'd like to talk about Maggie Haberman for just a second. Okay. Maggie Haberman is a longtime New York City reporter who came up in the New York City tabloids. Yep. And she scaled herself up, and now she's, the prime, one of the prime New York Times people covering the White House for the New York Times, right?
Sure.
So and Cohen said, "Oh yeah, so I talk to Maggie Haberman all the time." So I just want to give people a sense of what this means, okay? So Maggie Haberman wrote this book a year or two ago called The Confidence Man. It was a very well reviewed history of Donald Trump's career. Okay, she was on all the podcasts. Everyone said how great it was. Wildly reviewed in the New York Times. Frank Bruni in the New York Times wrote a column about how great it was and stuff like this. It's one of the worst political books ever written. Okay, period. And I have not read every book about the Trump administration. You just can't anymore. The people who write the best, do you have an opinion about who writes the best book on Trump administration?
I haven't read many.
Oh, Michael Wolff. The Michael Wolff books are just unbelievable. He's great on Fox News. He's great on Trump. He has unbelievable sources. People sneer at him, but I'll bet you 98% of what's in those books is accurate. And they're real. Okay. And the Haberman book on Trump is so bad that it's really, really difficult to get into it. But one of the things it does is that it tells the history of him, particularly over the last 8 or 10 years, as things were revealed in the media, not as when they happened. Okay. So the infamous Trump Tower meeting, for example, when they, talked to the Russian people about the adoptions and stuff like that, like she doesn't discuss that before the election.
Yeah.
She starts talking about it 6 months after the election, after Michael Wolff revealed it, right?
Yeah.
And she goes, oh, the Trump Tower me, and then she backfills.
Yeah.
So there was all that kind of stuff. I think I did a piece in the City Morning Herald about it. There's a term in journalism called a clip job. And what you do is you just write a history of something, just go back and look in the clips. So I'll just lay all the clips out. Those are the stories that were written on a particular subject, and you just write it from the perspective of that. But generally, when you're writing histories of things, you do the history of how things happen. You don't just mention them when they come in and then backfill all the information. It's just unbelievably irritating to read. And there's so many things that are very disturbing about it, but I just want to talk, because this I think really, really matters. So Michael Cohen said he had Maggie Haberman basically on speed dial. Okay. Let me just tell you about Michael Cohen really briefly. Okay. His father-in-law is basically tied up with I think it was the Ukrainian mob, and his uncle particularly, okay, ran this big saloon or a bar where they all hung out and stuff like this. I guess he had an uncle who was a doctor to a mob person, okay, and then he had this crazy financial history. Like he bought these apartments for like $8 million, and then 2 years later he sold them for $32 million.
Wow.
Okay, and this is a guy who's worried about getting $50,000 from Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, he and his father lent another a Russian mobster, $27 million unsecured. Okay, this all came out in the investigations, and ironically enough, in an investigation in the New York Times. Okay, and then he ran this skeevy taxi medallion business, because back in the day, taxi medallions would be worth $500,000 or $1 million in New York. And a medallion is the right to drive a cab around New York, and they're very closely held. You know, you can never get a cab when you want in a lot of these big cities, and the reason is the cab companies have a lot of money, and they pay off the politicians. Don't put out any more of these medallions, because every new cab on the street takes business away from us, right?
Yeah.
So, and he never got in actual legal trouble himself, but 3 or 4 of his partners did. Okay. Then he went around New York opening up all these quote unquote lawyer doctors' offices with these quote unquote lawyer doctors there. And people would come in and say, oh, I just got hit by a car. And the doctor would say, oh, your arm looks like it's broken. He goes, yeah. And then they filed an insurance claim. And you say, well, why did they do that? Well, New York started a no-fault insurance thing when it came to car insurance. So basically, all these poor insurance companies had to shell out no matter what. There wasn't a whole thing of any investigation. So they set up this scam with all these lawyer and doctor offices to do that. Now, he was never convicted of that.
Of course.
Okay. But that's the guy, that's who Michael Cohen is.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's this guy, he's basically a personal injury lawyer, and with all these mob connections, and all of a sudden he's selling $32 million worth of real estate with all these things in Trump Tower and stuff like this. So Maggie Haberman wrote a book about Donald Trump. Yes. Okay. Let me tell you how she introduces Michael Cohen. As always, Trump continued to collect new additions to his world, and one was a lawyer he first noticed when the man defended his name in a contentious co-op board meeting in a Manhattan building where he was a tenant. Michael Cohen was a failed Republican city council candidate and taxi medallion investor. Okay?
Sounds quite salubrious.
No, so the moral is, this is what happens when you have Maggie Haberman on speed dial.
Yeah.
When she writes a story about you, this is a major figure in Donald Trump, this is a major biography, and that is the background she gives on Michael Cohen. And all that stuff I said about him, I didn't go paging through all the leftist magazines and websites. That was all in the New York Times investigation of him.
Yeah.
Okay? Here's another example from there. You're familiar with Ivanka Trump?
I am.
Okay. So when she's writing about it, it's a very odd book. It's very, very disturbing. And let me tell you how she describes January 6th. Police officers were accosted, doors were smashed, and a small crew of Capitol police officers struggled to beat the mob back. Some rioters chanted "Hang Mike Pence" as wooden gallows appeared outside the building. Okay, so as a writer, you'll appreciate the use of the passive tense.
I didn't notice
Okay,
that. Yes.
Police officers were accosted.
Yes.
Now, if I were writing that, I would say, and I think you could say this, a band of sadists, morons, creeps, and radical racists swarmed the Capitol, trampling and beating up and blooding police officers. People ran all over them. People smashed through the doors. Terrible, terrible things happened that day. And here's a New York Times reporter writing in that thing in the passive, okay? That's really a tell. Let me mention, I'll tell you, there's also some indications that Melania Trump was a source. Why do I think that? Well, because Melania Trump 2 times is credited, 2 times in the book is credited with saying to Donald Trump, I think you should take coronavirus more seriously than you are. Because she's a pretty well-known, sophisticated political analyst, Melania Trump.
Yeah.
Okay, so that comes up in the book twice. Okay, I'll tell you what isn't mentioned in the book. It's not mentioned that Melania claims to speak 5 languages, which she doesn't. Yeah. That she claims to have an degree in architecture, which she didn't. Yeah. And nothing mentioned about her, plagiarizing Michelle Obama's speech or anything like that. So there's no background on that. Okay, so and generally you can tell when these places they don't tell you the worst stuff and they play up the most minor stuff, you can tell. And finally, Ivanka. Trump initially resisted urging, including from his daughter Ivanka, to use his social media platforms to tell the mob to disperse. A post she drafted for herself meant partly as a positive reinforcement for her father, addressed the rioters as, quote, American patriots. Just send it, Ivanka told an aide of the tweet as she, quote, as she raced downstairs to her father, but she deleted it amid an uproar and made clear she intended no harm by it.
So I think we can guess another one of Maggie's sources.
and I'm not joking. I'm not being arch or anything. And this is what happens when you're a source. And a more detached person would say, Ivanka, you were a special assistant to the President of the United States. You're sworn to uphold the Constitution. There were people overrunning. The White House is like 1.5 kilometers away from the Capitol when this was happening. Maggie Haberman doesn't say, why the hell didn't you do anything? Don't you have blood on your hands? All that stuff. And it's all kind of told in this very convoluted, backward going description of these things. And so anyway, that's the sort of thing that goes on behind the scenes, that you do that for a year or two. And then when those people write a book about events you're in, you'll be portrayed in a much better light than you deserve.
Your cynicism is incredibly enlightening, Bill. Thank you very much for that.
That's what I took out of the trial.
No, that's great. Yeah. I love it. Okay, I got a few correspondences about the trial, which I'm going to read, which is quite interesting. Purple Baron asks, hey Chaz, question about the Trump trial. Why is Alan Weisselberg not being called as a witness by either the defense or prosecution? He has intimate knowledge of payments to Cohen and is intricately connected with important details of the case. Is it because he might be unpredictable on the stand? If he's loyal to Trump, from what I understand, that's part of why he's currently in prison, he might refute some of what Cohen has testified to, and so the defense would call him. If he's not loyal to Trump, then surely the prosecution would want him to testify to back up testimony by Cohen. In my mind, even if he sat on the stand and pleaded the fifth to everything, that would still look really bad for Trump to the jury, and the prosecution would love for him to be there so that they could talk about how he is currently in prison for tax fraud at Trump.org. Okay, Judge Merchant was trying to get Weisselberg involved. He even speculated that he might get him in without the jury there just to suss out if he has anything to offer, but it never quite worked out. I think you need to split it into defense and prosecution to approach this. Defense, it's uncertain, I think, what value he would have for Team Trump, given, as Purple Baron said, he's currently serving time for perjury when defending Trump. So I don't know if he has anything to say which would help Trump. But if he did, it wouldn't be very credible, obviously. I suspect the defense's best strategy is to maintain that the prosecution haven't made their case, which is the strategy they're following through. As for the prosecution, well, there's one obvious reason why Weisselberg is not going to be wanting to cooperate with the prosecution. He has 3 payments of $250,000 coming his way this year if he shuts up. In particular, his severance package with Trump.org says that Weisselberg promises not to verbally or in writing disparage, criticize, denigrate the company or any of its executives, and also he will not communicate with and otherwise will not cooperate with any entity seeking adverse claims against the company. That's why he's not going to cooperate with the prosecution. Not to mention, he might not want to double cross Trump anyway. So, okay, but then to Purple Baron's point, about him taking the fifth. Should the prosecution subpoena him and treat him like a hostile witness? I mean, they could do that. He could sit there and plead the fifth over and over, and like Pearl Barron said, that might be effective. But I guess they thought that there's not much point of doing that because the benefits are limited. And especially if he's got the shits with the prosecution, is he trying to undermine their case? He could hurt their case in unpredictable ways. When you fire questions at him, you don't never know what he's going to say.
Yeah, he could say, no, I did it. Trump didn't know. He could just say that.
Yeah, he totally could. Yeah, so I guess they didn't want to take the chance.
Yeah.
I think that's reasonable, personally.
I know the Weisselberg story is so interesting in so many levels because of this whole family debauched by all this. Here's this elderly man in Rikers prison 2 times. I mean, that is very, very rough going. Yeah. And, you just assume that something's going on behind the scenes, money. I don't think this is a libelous. You just assume that Trump said to him, look, we'll take care of your kids. We'll da-da-da-da. And Weisselman's probably smart enough to say, let me see it in the bank. So I bet you there's some money somewhere, somehow. And, or it could just be he's just completely that into Trump and just, as part of the, like one of the, one of Polly Walnuts or something like that. And secondly, it's interesting, those obviously the non-disclosure does not apply to legal things, right? If he's subpoenaed. And then just for the record, I think that what you hear a lot of times is that they talk about these non-disclosure agreements, but there's a lot of times when it involves criminality, it's called something like against public policy, and they can be rendered invalid pretty quickly because you just can't say, you basically can't pay people money not to reveal crimes. I mean, but I think the main thing is what people say. Again, I'm not an expert. Is that you just don't want witnesses on when you just don't know what they're going to say. And then, as you said, the judge said, "Hey, well, let's bring them in and let's see." And I think both sides says, "Yeah, we don't think so."
Yeah. I was going to say, I like it. The unpredictable nature, I think, is a problem.
And one final thing, my understanding is, and we haven't really seen the full jury. They're arguing about the jury instructions right now. We've seen some little dribs and drabs about what the defense wants, what the prosecution wants. But it seems like what would be likely is that both sides can say, hey, Alan Weisselberg wasn't here. Why wasn't he?
Yeah.
And I think that's what the ultimate thing. So the prosecution can say, hey, if Alan Weisselberg would completely exonerate Trump, why didn't they bring him on? And then vice versa.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good call. Very good call, actually. Correspondence number 2. Melina and I were discussing the weirdness of Judge Mershon having donated $15 to Joe Biden. We thought that seemed like a pointless donation and then wondered why he'd done that for. Kevin made a suggestion, which was a good one. It hadn't even occurred to me. He said, the judge's $15 donation seems weird, but there's a possible explanation. Merch. To give a weird figure like $15 is definitely odd. It seems more likely he's bought some kind of item, a water bottle, a shirt, a pin, where proceeds go to the campaign, and then he felt the need to declare it. Good thought, Kevin.
Yeah.
You're quite right.
Yeah, and on the other hand, he should not have done that probably.
Yeah.
On the other hand, that in a lot of these big cities, it is a political.
Yes.
I think he's elected, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and you're just part of the local political machine.
Yeah.
And it could have been that he paid $15 to go to a fundraiser because someone came to his fundraiser or something like that. You never know.
That's true.
On the other hand, as with Alito, people should know I worked at NPR, and if I'd hung a American flag upside down inside my house, I would get in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And I had a friend from college who was a low-level committee, I shouldn't say low-level, but he was like a committee man in Maryland, which is a state right next to Washington, D.C. And I was talking to my boss one day and I go, God, I was at my friend George's house the other day and it was a thing. And he says, yeah, that's not right. And I had to call his treasurer up and say, you got to return it to me because, they don't want someone going through records of, oh my God, NPR editor giving money to, so the point being a lot of people take this stuff very seriously. And so I think it's fair to ding both Alito and him for that. But the $15 thing could have been completely, as you say, incidental. Absolutely. And it is a good sign that he did declare it, unlike the Supreme Court doing things for literally many orders of magnitude.
Yes, that is true. Correspondence number 3 is a real interesting one. I asked about the possibility that Judge Mershon was not randomly chosen. Jonathan Turley mentioned that in one of his columns, and I said, that's weird. Jonathan Turley doesn't usually make things up. So is it possible? I mean, aren't these judges randomly chosen? How could he not be randomly chosen? How could he be handpicked? And I said I was surprised if they were going to choose a judge, they would choose someone, A, who donated something to Trump, so donate something to Biden, but also the whole daughter thing. I don't think he should recuse himself because of the daughter thing. But if you're hand-picking a judge, then why wouldn't you pick someone who's completely clean? There's no problems whatsoever. No issues. But just to be clear, the reason I think the daughter's not a problem is because even though the daughter is definitely covered by New York ethics laws, she's not I don't know how many times I've got to say this because people just keep on asserting it. She's not benefiting from the trial. Like people just keep on asserting that because she's hired by Democrats, she's benefiting from the trial. She's not. She is a consultant who books ads for Democrats and runs policy for Democrats. The outcome of the trial has nothing to do with her employment. Like she's going to get paid whether Trump goes to jail or whether Trump gets off. Democrats still need to run ads. Yeah. They're going to pay consultants for ads. Like that's going to happen. So it makes no difference to her career whatsoever what happens in the trial. So she doesn't benefit from the trial. So there's no conflict of interest. I've said this about 50 times, but I just keep on hearing people saying, oh, she's benefiting from the trial. She's not. Anyway, that aside, I was wondering about whether Mershon was he randomly chosen or not? And David has come to my rescue again. David has featured a number of times. He was the one responsible for the Redfin stuff a few weeks back.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, well, the women for Cohen Twitter account I loved so much. And he's come to my rescue again. Even though he is a German and doesn't speak English as a first language, he somehow brings the goods over and over again way better than actual legal writers do. But anyway, so thank you, David. First of all, he notes that Steve Bannon has a trial scheduled this month before Judge Mershon. The next thing he asks is, were any of us paying such great attention to the previous criminal trials attendant upon the Trump org as to realise that Justice Mershon presided over all of them? Yeah. Was there ever a hint of reason to discuss his probity and fairness? David asks in his German way. then he pointed me to an article. And I'm going to read you an excerpt from the article. The article is from the Wall Street Journal, 30th of April 2023, selection of judge in Trump case could complicate proceedings. New York Supreme Court Justice Juan Mershon was assigned to preside over the hush money prosecution of former President Donald Trump because he had experience overseeing previous litigation involving the former president and his company, according to people familiar with the process. Justice Mershon's journey to the precedent-setting case began with an assignment to referee a subpoena dispute between the Manhattan District Attorney's Office and the Trump Organization in late 2020, the people familiar with the matter said. The court's administrative judge then tapped Justice Mershon, a 14-year veteran of Manhattan's criminal trial court, to supervise complex grand jury investigations into Mr. Trump and his businesses over the next 2 years, which led to his assignments to the cases that flowed from them, these people said. Since 2021, the judges held the Trump Organization in contempt for failing to turn over documents in one probe by the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, presided over a trial in which a jury convicted the company of tax fraud, and sentenced former company finance chief Alan Weisselberg to jail for tax and other offences. A former New York judge said assigning Justice Mershon to the case was consistent with a common practice in the Manhattan Criminal Trial Court of grouping related cases with a single judge. The hush money investigation and earlier probes of Mr. Trump and his business, if not closely related, were at least cousins, the former judge said. So, an administrative judge selects who the judge overseeing the case is. They are handpicked. That's a fact. And they like to get the same person who deals with some cases from an organization to deal with the other cases from that organization because they're familiar with the ins and outs of that organization. There is a logic to that. That makes sense. And David points out that logic quite clearly. If it hasn't occurred to you guys yet, David points out, I'm thinking of Judge Beryl Howell in DC. We have her 82-page decision from March 2023 unsealed in the last few days. She's the one with all the Mar-a-Lago stuff. That touches upon documents found at Mar-a-Lago months after the FBI's search of the property in the summer of 2022. And we have very clearly here a judge who has the confidence and experience required to make a fair and firm written judgment. Was she not sought out to return to Trump cases? And the point that David's making there, in his German way, is that if Judge Beryl Howell was dealing with the Mar-a-Lago documents instead of Aileen Cannon, it probably would be running a hell of a lot smoother because she knows what she's doing. And that is an excellent point from David, I think. And so he's right. And he's also right that no one was protesting about Mershon's supposed bias until Trump wanted to dirty up the judge. He went through, 6 cases? No problems. It's just the 7th one that there was a problem because Trump wanted to dirty up the judge. Nevertheless, I still can't help thinking that getting the squeakiest clean judge you could possibly get for Trump, even back in 2020 when this all started, would have been the best option because you from the very beginning, when you're dealing with Trump, you know at some point in time when the rubber hits the road, he's going to fight dirty. You know that. He always does it. So I still feel like if they were appointing someone, even way back when, they should have appointed someone else. That's my personal view. But I want to thank David for his help there because this whole question is not something I've heard anyone discussing in the mainstream media for the whole trial. And I think it's an interesting issue. What's your thoughts on this?
It's kind of interesting because this is actually this is a fairly common phenomenon in American courts. And I'm not a huge expert on it, but I would have just said, oh, yeah, that happens a lot. And there's a lot of other bankruptcy courts, for example. That's the whole region of bankruptcy, family law, and stuff like that. So it's a tradition in American judiciary. And that was one of the big debates about whether you prosecute the Mar-a-Lago case down in Palm Beach or if you do it in Washington, where you could make a strong case that there was that there was part of the crime happened in Washington or even in Bedminster, which they've never actually searched. So there's been this huge debate about it. And then the other thing is that they wanted to do it up north because you have judges that are experienced in dealing with classified documents. They know how to handle CISA things, the Secrets Act. Permutations of these complicated trials and stuff like that. And that's another reason Eileen Cannon is so behind because she's never dealt with this before. One of the things that went around with Elon Musk, for example, is that through a quirk in American law, a lot of corporations are incorporated in the state of Delaware. Do you know about this? Yeah. Because they have some would say friendly corporate law. But what you do is you get a court system that really understands corporate law and people don't have to educate themselves on the parameters of it. And I think it's very, very common. So, and then to your point about recusing, I mean, again, I come from the left. I grew up, I went to school at Berkeley. I, come with all the suspicions you have of, the left of American political institutions. And the American judiciary is pretty well run.
Yeah. Okay.
It really honestly is. And one of the interesting things about the Trump era is that, sooner or later you do come in contact with those courts and the courts are kind of no nonsense. And there's a lot of corrupt police departments and stuff like this, but a lot of shenanigans go on in the world. But once the police get involved, notwithstanding the fact that obviously blacks are treated more unfairly and if the police get involved, that's when the people have to take out their clown masks and deal with serious things. And I think part of the thing with the courts is we don't play that way. We know what you do when you recuse each other. We know what fairness is. We know how these things go. This is how we do things. You want to bring a serious issue to us about recusal or something like that, there's a process. You're welcome to do it, but we're not going to sit there and second guess ourselves. And it's also kind of nice because the whole reason Trump does dirty the people, and from the right they've gone to such lengths, is to get them to do that. Let's not get the obvious thing because, he gave $15 to Biden once. Let's get someone who's less knowledgeable, newer, allegedly squeaky clean. And I think I kind of like it that they're just not playing that game. They're saying, hey, if you have something, file a motion and we'll talk about it, but we're not going to play, we're not going to get in, we're not going to, let you just invent things out of whole cloth. And they're welcome to do that. And when it comes down to it, there's very little going on. Now, and then you have what's going down in Fulton County, right, with Fannie Willis and Nathan Wade and all that stuff, where you do have something going on that was wrong. And look what happened. The judge says, look, that's not right. You can't be having your boyfriend working on your staff. So either you recuse yourself or get rid of that guy. And then, I don't know if you saw what happened about this, that she went on, was it Rachel Maddow, Fannie Willis, and that Nathan Wade went on Joy Reid's show on MSNBC in the last week or so?
No, I didn't know this. Oh.
It is just unbelievable that you had this district attorney in this incredible high-profile thing going on to a partisan political show and talking about it. She didn't say anything too bad, but you'd think she would keep her head down. And then her ex-boyfriend, who just created this huge disruption in a conspiracy trial of a former president of the United States is going on Joy Reid's show. And, Joy Reid is one of the worst of the people on MSNBC.
Very partisan.
And he didn't quite say anything that he wasn't supposed to say. But I'm sorry, you were sleeping with the district attorney and now you're on a national TV show. Like, you just kind of wonder what these people are doing. And they're two people who might actually really get themselves into more trouble because of all this. So the process does work when it's appropriate. And it's possible the process is going to work the other way on with Eileen Cannon at some point if she makes a bad move at some point. So
I was going to talk about the red tie brigade, the sycophants hanging outside Trump's courtroom, but I'm just looking at the time. I reckon let's just skip that. I'm just keen to get your stuff done before we run out of time, Bill.
Okay.
So
all I have is Crime and Drudge.
Well, you forgot Live Nation.
Oh yeah, Live Nation too.
Yeah,
oh boy.
I want exactly. I want.
Oh, that's when I said hold my beer.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear about that?
I want to hear about Live Nation because for people who don't know what I'm talking about, the Justice Department has just filed a massive antitrust lawsuit against Ticketmaster and its parent company, Live Nation. I just have a personal bias. I've got to declare I hate ticketing companies. Like, I think they add very little except for fees, and they drive me crazy. And this would win my vote. And by the way, it's not a partisan thing. It was filed with attorneys general from 29 states plus DC, red states and blue states, Texas, South Carolina, California, New York. They're all working together. The one thing that unites America is a hatred of ticketing companies, and it's basically accusing Live Nation and Ticketmaster of holding an illegal monopoly on live event tickets and driving up prices. This was going to be my grateful originally. And I mentioned that to Bill because I'm just so grateful for this lawsuit. I mentioned this to Bill and he said, his text was, hold my beer. And of course, Bill's a previous music journalist who know all about these live shows. So I'm sure you got plenty to say about where the bodies are buried in this. So tell us about it.
Thank you very much. I have a very peculiar history with this, okay? Yes. This all goes, first of all, there were these two companies, Ticketron and Ticketmaster, okay, that sold these tickets. And it's difficult when you have these two companies competing with each other, okay? So what they did is they called each other up and say, hey, let's just divide up the country. You take Southern California, I'll take Northern California. I'll go here, you go there. We won't compete, okay? It's patently illegal to do that, okay? So that's where this all started, okay? So this was a company that was started in criminality. Okay? Yes. So now hold that thought. Secondly, then you have this other company called Clear Channel. Yeah. Okay, and Clear Channel owned a whole bunch of radio stations in America. And it was the most corrupt, awful, company that did all these terrible, terrible things. They would buy these radio stations and then basically fire everyone who worked at the station and then hire people in another state to say things like, hey, here's the Rolling Stones' new hit, Miss You. Okay, and that was the Rolling Stones' Miss You. Next up, Lynyrd Skynyrd's Freebird. Yeah. Okay, that was Freebird. And then they do that, and then they'd hire someone to edit the songs in and then broadcast it in Wyoming. Okay, and then what happened is that you had a train derail and spread this poisonous gas all over this town. And then they called up the radio station and said, you got to let people know there's a poisonous gas. But there was no one at the radio station. Okay, that's the kind of company this was. And I have a personal involvement because when I was at Salon, I had this writer named Eric Bollert, who actually died a couple years ago tragically. He was a great writer, great reporter. And he did this series called Radio's Big Bully that won, I think it was the second Online Journalism Award for Investigative Story of the Year. Okay, so that's something I really care about. Clear Channel eventually took over the concert promoting, the massive concert promoting monopoly in America, okay? And Clear Channel destroyed their name in both radio stations and concert promotion to the extent they had to get rid of the name and they renamed themselves Live Nation. Okay, so that's what Live Nation is, to start out. Then, this is then go back in time in the 90s, what Then let's go back to Ticketmaster for a second. Sorry.
Yep.
So what Ticketmaster is, it grew more and more powerful. They were really, really smart about this. And part of the reason is you're going to buy this concert ticket. It's like, oh, I can't wait to see the Stones. I can't wait to see Taylor Swift. And you go and buy, oh, and there's a ticket fee and a delivery fee and a this fee and that fee. And then sometimes it'd be really high, right? But you've been on the phone back then for a long time. You've been online for a long time. It's like, oh my God, that extra $15, I don't know, da, da, da. And sometimes it'd be $50. Sometimes it'd be $4.95. And sometimes it was just crazy. So you wonder how that happens. Like, why did people put up with it? Well, what Ticketmaster did is they'd go to a concert hall, okay, or a stadium or an arena, and they'd say, hey, you should only use us to sell for your events. And what we'll do is we'll give some of your money back to you. We'll kick back some of the money if you give us a 10-year contract. Okay. And then they go to artists and they'd say, hey, you're doing that big tour. How about we'll do a $5 ticket fee on the tour and we'll kick back $2 to you. Okay. And the same guy, Eric Bollert, that I was talking about, who did the Clear Channel stories, back in the 90s, he was working for Billboard, and he was the only person in America covering this. And he talked to Aerosmith's manager, and Aerosmith's manager, Aerosmith, which is not, a particularly wholesome operation, went to Ticketmaster. They said, look, we want to keep ticket fees low, so let's lower them from $3 to $2. And the guy on the record says, Ticketmaster said, no, why don't we raise it to $5 and we'll split the extra $2 with you. Yeah. Okay, so that's what's going on. So what they're doing is they created this immense slush fund, and then they were using that money to give kickbacks to artists and to venues so that nobody could compete with them.
Yes.
Okay, so then the companies merged.
Yes.
Okay, so you have this unholy merger of the two worst things. I mean, the music industry in America is the most corrupt industry in America, if you can believe that. I mean, just it always has been. Every single pillar of it is built on corruption. So this being something that's going on for a long time. And then what happened is Pearl Jam said, look, we're not going to, they were a very principled rock band back then. They said, look, we're going to go out and tour, and we're not going to use Ticketmaster. And it almost destroyed the band. They couldn't find any place to play, and they'd say, fine, we'll do it out in fields. But then all of a sudden you got to have fencing, you got to have bathrooms, you got to have all this insurance. And then, you have problems. He got sick a couple times, had to cancel shows. And it was just an incredibly chaotic time. And so I just loved all this, and I just wrote about it. And one of the shameful things at the time is that Eric Bollert and Billboard was the only person writing about it. Yeah. Even though, New York Times didn't write about this. Rolling Stone didn't cover it. Spin didn't cover it. None of these music magazines did anything about it. And the whole Pearl Jam Ticketmaster thing, it was well known at the time, but they never did the kind of investigative reporting that they do. I was writing in Chicago at the time. I wrote about it incessantly and stuff like this, and all this other crazy stuff happened. So anyway,
I should just jump in for a second. We referred to the merger. I should just point out that the Obama Department of Justice originally sued to block that merger in 2009.
Right.
They tried to stop it happening. Then in 2010, they signed a consent decree allowing it to go ahead under certain conditions. I'm not sure why they backed down.
Right.
Like they,
I was going to get to that.
Oh, sorry.
I was going to say is that this has been a perennial thing that's been happening. Yeah. And then everyone says that Pearl Jam sued Ticketmaster way back then, but actually the Justice Department was investigating it already. Yeah. They went to Pearl Jam and they said, what's going on? They said, here's what it was. So that's technically, and I had that, the reporting I did at the time from both people at the Justice Department and Pearl Jam people said, look, that's what happened, but that got lost. Everyone said, oh, Pearl Jam's fighting with Ticketmaster.
Gotcha.
Then, in whenever that was, 2008 or 9, I was writing this blog called Hitsville at the time, and I was covering this during all those things, and they had and then you get into a whole other thing with Irving Azoff, who was a super manager. Then he took this over, but he kind of kept his super management firm. So you just have this crazy thing, because just imagine if you're a rock artist and Irving Azoff is representing you, and then he goes, hey, I'm the CEO of Live Nation and Ticketmaster now. So how about if we do a tour with you and you play at Live Nation venues and you do all your tickets through Ticketmaster? And if you say as an artist, you go, well, like, what if we wanted to play somewhere else? It's like, do you want your manager mad at you? Do you want the largest concert facility company in the world mad at you? Do you want Ticketmaster mad at you? So it became this incredibly powerful cartel. And he testified and all this crazy stuff. And basically nothing ever came to it. And the reason that evidence that nothing came to it is that Ticketmaster started a StubHub competitor. Because then you have this crazy shadowy world of reselling. Okay. And the last thing I'm going to say is that this is a very complicated issue. And the reason is, as the head of Ticketmaster said many years ago, concert tickets are the most underpriced commodity in American life. Okay. And the reason is that you want to see Bruce Springsteen. Back then, the front row ticket might be $100. And you go, oh my God, who can afford $100? Well, you can buy that ticket for $100 and turn around and sell it for $1,000 because there's people who pay $1,000 for a front row seat. So then the question is, well, doesn't Bruce Springsteen deserve that money?
Yeah.
Like, why should I be able to buy it for $100 and turn around and sell it for $1,000?
Yeah.
Like, there's something really, really wrong there. And you have these artists who want to keep their ticket prices relatively low. But then the minute, as you know, as a libertarian, that the minute you start selling anything for less than it's worth, you create this penumbral market for reselling. So then this company called StubHub came in to officialize all that stuff. And that became very shadowy as well, because just imagine that you're the Rolling Stones and you have, let's say you have $1,000 front row ticket price. What you can do is take your own tickets and don't sell them for $1,000, but give them to StubHub and sell them for $5,000. Okay, which also happens.
Yeah.
You have artists scalping their own tickets.
Okay.
Okay, and then Ticketmaster created this thing called, I think it's called Tickets Now, to compete with that. So now you have this manager and the concert promoting industry and the ticket selling industry and the reselling thing all kind of mixed up together.
God.
Okay, so it's a very, very terrible thing. It's about time. But the only thing that we should remember is that it is a very, very difficult thing, and that the real solution to this is basically have an auction. Say, hey, who will pay the highest for front row center? Who will pay the highest for second row center? And that's the way. I mean, and if you don't do that, you're going to create this incentive to have this other market. And it's a very intractable thing. I hate scalpers. I did a series back in Chicago of all the kind of sleazy things that would go on. I remember on a very cold Chicago morning, I went to see Bruce Springsteen go on tickets. This is before the internet era. Okay. So you have all these yuppies that could have been me or you lining up in the cold at 8 a.m. in front of Rose Records down the Loop in Chicago, waiting to get their Bruce Springsteen tickets because they love Bruce and they're going to go see him, right? Stuff like that. So then there's this line, and at the front of the line, there were 20 homeless people. Okay, and there was this weird guy with long hair and a Fu Manchu mustache, as God is my witness, a cane and a cape, walking up and down the line, keeping the homeless guys. And you go, well, wait a minute, because Rose Records has this thing. What you do is you go to Rose Records and you randomly get a little wristband, and you get a random number, and then that way you don't have to stay in line. You can just show up there at 7:45, and you have your number, and that's how you get in line. And so what had happened is they'd paid off someone at Rose Records to get the first 20 numbers, okay? And then this guy marshaled his homeless guys. And so it was this great scene because you have all these entitled yuppies going, wait a minute, I came here to get Bruce tickets, and it's obvious you people are pulling something fast on us here with all these homeless guys. So that's the kind of stuff that went on. So you're always going to have that issue going on. It's a difficult problem, but let me tell you, even in the scummy record industry, Live Nation, Clear Channel, and Tickets Now, Ticketron, and Irving Azoff are just the worst of the worst. That's my history.
That is very enlightening. Now let me say a couple of things about this particular case, and you can jump in whenever you want because you know more than I do. I've just read a few articles. So I was going to say that they did sign this consent decree in 2010, which would allow them to go ahead without under certain conditions, and Live Nation immediately violated those conditions multiple times. They were eventually compelled to pay a $3 million fine, which is very not much for these guys, in 2019. In 2020, the consent decree was extended for 5 additional years. Then there was a big clusterfuck with the Taylor Swift tickets, which sort of exposed just how much of a monopoly these guys had. And they were going to go back and find them again, but then they thought, nah, we're going to sort these guys out once and for all. And that was what initiated this particular lawsuit. Where they are at the moment, Live Nation controls about 60% of concert promotions at major concert venues across the country, either through long-term contracts or direct ownership. Ticketmaster controls ticketing about 80% of the same concert venues, and an increasingly large amount of the scalping market, as you said. Now, in terms of evidence of anti-competitive behaviour, because we've just asserted some, What we got is the Oakview Group is they control 400 venues worldwide. There's apparently evidence that they've been suborned to protect Live Nation's monopoly by not bidding for the same live talent. Apparently, there's evidence of this. At least part of it is an email that somehow from Oakview Group's chief executive to Live Nation's chief executive, Michael Rapino, said, I don't know how they got their hands on this email, but it said, I always protect you on rebates, promoter position, and ticketing, which is it's a bit of a smoking gun from one company to the next. Live Nation also successfully threatened financial retaliation against the private equity firm Silver Lake, compelling Silver Lake to direct its subsidiary TEG to not compete with Live Nation for promotion contracts in the United States. Live Nation commits concert venues to long-term contracts, like Bill said, that prevent new and different promotions and ticketing competitors and business models from emerging. Also, it gets them to sign exclusive agreements with Ticketmaster. The evidence for this, Live Nation Chief Executive Michael Rapino admitted, he said this out loud at a 2019 Goldman Sachs conference. He said, we can't say to a Ticketmaster venue that says they want to use a different ticketing platform, if you do that, we won't put shows in your building. But we have to put the show where we make the most economics. And maybe that venue that wants to use a different ticketing platform won't be the best economic place anymore because we don't hold the revenue. He just said it out loud. Ticketmaster obviously uses its monopoly power to impose endless bullshit fees. The DOJ complaint mentioned service fees, VIP fees, platinum fees, price master fees, pre-order fees, payment processing fees, and facility fees. I don't know what any of them are. John Oliver is a bit obsessed with Ticketmaster. He's run a few segments about this. He, over the years, has dug up a 2019 ticket to a Kids Bop concert where the fees added 75% of the ticket value to the total cost. A 2022 Tyler, the Creator ticket where the fees added 78% to the ticket cost. And a 2019 Monster Jam ticket where the fees added more than 100% to the ticket cost. But then, like Pearl Jam situation, John Oliver had to use Ticketmaster and Live Nation for his performance anyway when he went on tour.
Absolutely.
Because there was no one else. He literally just can't do it. So anyway, Live Nation's response to this, Dan Wall, Live Nation's executive vice president, has said that Live Nation's revenue has declined due to competition and that the suit won't reduce ticket prices. Dan Wall shows this graph right here, showing that Live Nation only makes 1.4% profit compared to the tech giants, which make 20% profit. I don't know how that's relevant because the allegation isn't that they're making lots of money. The allegation is they are behaving anti-competitively and harming consumers. That's the allegation. Right. And I feel like the evidence is there. Yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
Well, just a couple things. One is that a lot of people in the industry don't like them either. That's the thing. There is this weird thing that there's so much money going on. And Ticketmaster has always said they don't make much money. And then it's this interesting thing that they don't have to. But the point is they're just sluicing the money back to the artists and the venues. Like they're there to take the heat. Yeah. That's the thing. They can say everyone hates Ticketmaster, but they're not saying, but wait, Britney Spears is the one getting most of those fees that you don't like. Okay. Yeah. Secondly, the issue really is because artists should be able to should be able to charge whatever they want for their shows. Yeah. Like nobody's saying that. It's just charge. Just tell me the price and I'll pay it. It's the sleaziness of adding it all on and stuff like this. And then you have this still argument say, look, if you don't like it, don't buy the ticket. And so what does it matter if I say that the ticket is $119 or if I say it's $100 at first, but I add $19 in fees before checkout? And basically you can just make this argument. Look, when I go to Kohl's, there's not someone saying, oh, look, if you want to check out, you got to pay me $5 to get into the checkout line. Otherwise you're stuck here. Yeah. You go put all your stuff back. You know what I mean? Like it just seems like it's not that the government, without saying, look, you can charge whatever you want, but you're not going to do that thing where you stop people at the checkout counter and charge them $5 to get in line. It's just not going to happen. And then when this all started happening in 2009, I was writing this blog and I hit this real sweet spot. And I don't want to mention any names, but literally 2 managers of incredibly famous bands literally called me up or wrote me to feed me negative information. And I was a nobody. I mean, I just did this little blog at the time. And it wasn't like I was writing for Salon even then or anything like that. It was just this independent little thing. And that's how thirsty people were in the industry to have anyone writing about this. Final thing, Taylor Swift.
Yes.
That's one of those things that, again, gives me a headache because there's two issues there. And the first is totally wrong. And the second doesn't get talked about. Like the fact that people can't get Taylor Swift tickets, tough shit.
Yeah.
Okay. That has nothing to do with Ticketmaster.
Yeah.
It has to do with she's coming to town. There's 50,000 seats. More than 50,000 people want to see her. They didn't get their tickets. That has nothing to do with Ticketmaster.
Well, to be fair, they had their equipment had a crash at one point in time, but that's not anti-competitive behavior. That's
Right.
just, that's
I
just
mean,
tough
and even
luck.
that happens,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, the issue with Ticketmaster that is annoying is that they because I hate Ticketmaster and I try to be honest about this. I'm a critic. I still get free to rock shows, you know. So that's I have lived blessedly free from Ticketmaster. So it's really hard for me when I have to. Yeah. So trying to get tickets to things like the Australian Open or the Australian F1 stuff like that, I get into that thing. And what happens that they should not be able to do because they do have this monopoly, and I think it's appropriate for the government to put restrictions on it, is they say, okay, you're waiting in line for 20 minutes, which is fine. Hey, a lot of people want it, stuff like that. But then once you're let in, you should be able to buy tickets. And what happens is you wait for 20 minutes and there's no tickets. Like there just should be a thing at the beginning that says, hey, we have 50,000 tickets. There's a limit of 4. That means we're going to allow 12,500 people into the queue. And the rest of you go home. And they don't. They and several times when I've tried to get tickets and stuff like that, it reminds me that as a critic, I always try to say, one of the reasons I feel so strongly about this is that a lot of times critics and people in the entertainment industry, editors of magazines, they're not ever dealing with Ticketmaster. You know, they're up in the skybox, and they didn't have to go through those processes. And so that's the issue, is that the way they sell the tickets should be done in a transparent and fair way, and they should just have a price. And then related to the Taylor Swift thing is like this thing that happened with Bruce Springsteen eventually. Like, I don't know if you heard, but his last tour, $5,000 tickets.
I did not hear that.
Okay. And
Yes.
the thing is that Bruce, what about you, New Jersey working man? And the organization basically said, you know what? We've been doing that for 20, 30 years. You know, this is, we're going to have the last few tours and we're just going to, and again, I think there's a really great argument. Like, why should I sell a ticket that's going to allow some scummy mob, gross person create a bot to buy the tickets and then resell it to some tech bro for 5 times the purchase price? Like, why should he get the money instead of Bruce Springsteen? And I think that they should. There was that idea that people had a long time ago that what artists should do is take the first 5 rows and say, we're going to auction them off, highest bidder, but we're going to give 50% of the proceeds to a local charity. Like, that's the way to do it. Say, you know what? Hey, let's let all the big, or what they could do is even checkerboard it. Say, hey, we're going to checkerboard, and like maybe not the first 5 rows, but half of the first 10 rows or something. Let all those jerks pay through the nose, and we'll give it to the local children's hospital. Excuse me. We'll give it to the local children's hospital. So that's a way to get around it. There's all sorts of ways. Technology is getting better with ID and tying individual people to the tickets, but it is very difficult. On the other hand, I went to Taylor Swift, and everything about that show was just terrific. And I think that they're getting to the point now where the technology will work to where they can take care of everybody and blah, blah, blah.
I knew you'd give us so much on that. I'm so
Sorry
glad
about that.
No. I'm so glad that we did this. Like as soon as I saw that topic, I thought, this has got Bill written all over it.
Stats Nugget.
Ooh, what is it?
Woo! Okay, I've got another one in Chaz Unleashed, but this one is a very random Stats Nugget. Very random. It comes to us courtesy of Stats New Zealand.
Ooh, very nice.
New Zealand, the total number of sheep fell by 3% to 24 million for the year ended June 2023. That's roughly half the figure recorded 2 decades ago, 65% less than 1981, when there were approximately 22 sheep for every resident. Since New Zealand population is now more than 5.2 million, that means the ratio of sheep to people is down to about 4.6. It's about 4.6 sheep per people in New Zealand. That's the lowest ratio for over 170 years.
Wow.
Now, that's partly because the price of wool has plummeted and farmers look to cut costs where they can. It's also because of the loss of farmland. Because since 2011, the country has lost more than 940,000 hectares of grassland. Why? Because New Zealand introduced a carbon trading program which allows companies to offset emissions with carbon credits purchased from forest owners. So farmers make more money by converting their agricultural land to forest.
Oh.
So global warming is very, very indirectly responsible for the demise of the New Zealand sheep rooting joke, which is just about to become irrelevant, it seems.
Yeah, that was a wild and woolly statistic.
Yeah, there we go. Very good. Well done. Woo! Okay, Bill, tell us about crime. Sorry? What were you going to say?
Okay, so I'll do quick on crime
Yes.
and then Drudge. Is that okay?
Just whatever
Drudge
you
is really
want.
fine. Just really quickly on crime. I have a little pet peeve going on with
Okay.
this because I was at a little barbecue party with some friends. I met some really amazing. These are professional academic people.
Yeah.
But this one woman was saying, "Oh, crime in America is out of control. They're not arresting criminals anymore. Everything's running wild." And da da da. And you hear this a lot. People in Australia think that America is a very dangerous place, which in some ways it is. And this is something I brought up before, but just for the record, I would just like to make clear
Please.
that there has been this profound thing that happened in America over the last 30 years, which is that crime dropped, let's just say roughly by 50%. Murders, violent crime, stuff like this have just gone precipitously. And it's just this really interesting phenomenon that we've talked about before. There's all these theories about how and why it happened.
Yes.
But there is this mythology that persists, and I just want to contextualize it just a little bit. One is that there are certain cities where crime is very bad, and people don't understand why. Chicago, which is sort of one of my hometowns, incredibly tragic what's going on in what we call the south side of Chicago, which is the poor African-American part of town. The crime down there is terrible. And actually, statistics don't even capture how bad it is because it is confined to these poorer areas. So you might have this citywide crime rate in Chicago, but the brunt of it is taken in these poorer areas.
So it's much worse there.
Yeah, it's really terrible. It's the same in Washington, D.C. It's not quite representative, but where I lived in Washington, D.C., there was zero crime. We would literally go to neighborhood meetings and have a cop there and say, well, we had a mugging last year. Okay, this is in Washington, D.C., which is one of the most notoriously crime-ridden cities in America. And that's because I lived across the street from the FBI. So, but the National Mall, you could walk in the National Mall at 2 a.m. with no fear at all. And so that's a real that's something that's very tragic. And it's not ameliorative at all to say that, a lot of it has to do with the drug trade and stuff like that, because this is still real people who are suffering the brunt of all this. Another interesting thing is that crime in the so-called red states is much worse on the whole than it is in the blue states. Okay? There's this thing that Trump says, Democratic mayors, all the crime and stuff like this. And there are some pockets. New Orleans, very dangerous city right now. Baltimore, some dangerous city like this. But New York City, for example, which was this notorious, has one of the lowest crime rates. I think it's the safest large city in America, and it has a much lower crime rate than most of the southern states, for example, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi, Oklahoma, and stuff like this. There's a very funny story in the Times. I think it was Nick Kristof who, I don't know if he was at there, but there was a debate in Oklahoma where someone running for senator or governor said, well, this governor, the current Republican governor, isn't taking care of Oklahoma. The crime rate here is really high. It's much higher than it is in New York City. And the incumbent governor literally laughed at him. Are you telling me that crime here is worse than in New York City? And it became this kind of weird moment. But of course it was true because the red states do have much higher. And I'm speaking in very crude terms, using the murder rate, violent crime. I'm trying to bounce back and forth between things that are ameliorative, that make it seem crime isn't so bad and that's actually worse. Another way it's worse is that, of course, when you talk about violent crime, a lot of them aren't reported. Rapes aren't always reported. A lot of times people get mugged and just go, whatever, just go home. Your car got broken into. You don't really report it because who wants to wait 3 hours for the cops to get here? I lived in Phoenix, which is a very large city. For some reason, one time we had the police at our house for something. I was just talking to them, and I forget, it won't make any sense to this, but he was describing the geographical area that he and his partner were covering at that time. And it was this massive swath of downtown Phoenix. Okay. They were the only two guys. Oh yeah, we're the only two guys on right now. Another time, when you have older parents, you have to empty out the house. And so a couple times I've either done that or helped with other people. And sometimes you find guns or bullets. And when you find stuff like that, you're supposed to take it to the police station. So I remember one time I went to the precinct station for my area, and it happened to be after 5. It was closed. Okay, the idea of a police station being closed, because they're famously open 20, every movie in the world, 2:30 in the morning, they're bringing in the perps and stuff like this. The idea of having a police station that basically everyone, they just shut down at 5. And I'm sure there were some people in there, but it wasn't open to the public at 5. So crime is a serious subject and people get robbed, which is terrible. It should never happen, stuff like this. But on the whole, crime in America is very low. There's some obviously things that happened during the pandemic, post-pandemic and stuff like that. But basically, it's just such a much safer country than it was. And, they've learned a lot, and a lot of these cities have been cracking down. Oh, and the final thing is there's also new kinds of crime they're just dealing with. So when you hear about shoplifting, it's really not shoplifting. It's these organized gangs that are figuring ways to just overwhelm the system, and the cities are figuring out ways to cope with it. And then it all gets mixed up with these, you have certain DAs and district attorneys where the legal chiefs in cities and counties who sometimes are trying to deal with crime in a different way. And that's being used by the right to fight about, so-called rising crime rates, which doesn't really jibe. Because some cities that do that have had rising crime rates. Others have done that and they've had lower crime rates. So, but on the other hand, there have been people, particularly in California, who are taking the brunt of it. And finally, it's also getting all mixed in with homelessness, which is a whole other issue and has to do with mental health, particularly in California. And that goes back to Ronald Reagan, who got rid of all the mental health facilities in the state of California. And so basically, the prison system becomes the mental health department of the state, which creates all sorts of problems. And if they don't end up in jail, they end up on the streets. Another thing about this, and again, it's incredibly multifaceted and complex, but one of the reasons you do have this reform is that when someone shoplifts, there's an interest in society to not get that person into the criminal justice system, right? Because a lot of times, first offenders, it's a kid, it's a dumb person, and what has been happening, and this is the downside of New York, for example, under first Giuliani and then Bloomberg, where you had that so-called stop and frisk, where you really clamp down on people, is the personal tragedy that you're putting a lot of people into the criminal justice system who shouldn't be there. And what that does then impairs their ability to get a job later, paying taxes, bringing up their kids, losing their job, going on welfare. There's all sorts of crazy things. And so there is this balance where some of the prosecutors are just trying to say, hey, let's not get those people right away into the system, screw up their life, because the costs of society later are much higher. And I always think about this friend of mine who's a juvenile justice expert in California, who says there's actually a real cure to 99% of all juvenile crime, and it's that they turn 18. Yeah. And that, they get through their childhood, they don't end up in jail, and they're fine. And you put them into the system before then, and you're really dooming them.
Sure. The other thing I was going to say is that on this, like I just said, there's no simple answer, and so I'm not going to pretend this is a simple answer, but I just wanted to clear my priors because I've got them.
Your prior convictions? For shoplifting? How many?
I haven't got any convictions. I had plenty of arrests. Okay. That's the nature of my job in the past. But I was just going to say that that from what I understand, from at least from the studies I've seen, there's only one thing that is guaranteed to make a difference, but just costs a lot of money, is just to have more police. I didn't say more arrests. I said more police. Yeah. Like people talk about the broken windows thing in New York, which you just referred to, the idea of, just low level offenses, charging people for low level offenses to stop it escalating. But under the broken windows, there were more police. And it seems that wherever you go, when there seems like less chance you'll get away with it, you're much less likely to commit a crime. And the system they have in America where they're much less likely to get arrested, but every now and then they hit the lottery and they go to jail for 30 years, that's not helping anyone, because people assume that's not going to happen to them, right? And so they don't price that in. Whereas if they think to themselves, there's a high chance I'm going to get caught if I commit a crime because there's a cop over there, or there's a cop every 2 minutes whenever I look up, then they're much less likely to commit a crime. And certainly the evidence I've seen suggests that if you can afford to have lots of police, it solves a lot of problems. And people attribute a whole bunch of other great innovations as doing what essentially is just. And when I say, by the way, police, I don't necessarily mean police on the beat. You could be working with the community. It could
Exactly.
be like that. Like that's something which that's a program that apparently has been very successful in a lot of places where the police are working with the community, not in a law enforcement capacity, but just being around and just helping out and just whatever, and like and just working like the police boys clubs and all that kind of stuff. It's like I said, I'm no expert, but just I see that coming up again and again and again. That when you have any kind of reform which involves more police being around, it tends to have positive effects in terms of crime.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Okay.
I might be wrong.
I got more about that, but next time we'll talk
Next
more.
time. Well, I'm just trying to cram as much Bill in as I can here.
Oh, thanks.
So just finish off whatever you want to do. Go
the one
Drudge,
thing.
whatever you want.
Oh, yeah. The one I wonderful because you guys were talking about Matt Drudge last week.
We were, yes.
And Matt Drudge, I forget how he came up. How did he come up?
He came up because that was one of the polls that Michael Cohen paid Redfin to rig. It was a Drudge poll.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
And so Drudge has a very special place in American political history, right? Okay. And what he is, he's this very weird guy. I don't want to say he was a ne'er-do-well, but he was kind of bouncing around doing all this stuff in the 90s. Okay. And he ended up having this little, he worked at maybe some place in LA like Universal Studios or something like this. And we hear this little gossip about the entertainment industry. And he started emailing his friends about it and eventually turned into a little website. And he just started developing all these sources. Okay. And he was an extraordinary journalist. Okay. Because he kept delivering sources and getting things and putting it out there, became more and more popular. Okay. And he took himself he made himself infamous. Okay, and became a household name in what year? 1998. Yep. Okay, January, and I found it. Okay,
you found
this
it?
is it. Yeah, I found it.
That could be Drudge.
Posted 1/17/98, 21:32 PST, all capitals. He always wrote in all capitals.
Yes.
Newsweek kills story on White House intern XXXX.
Yes.
Blockbuster report: 23-year-old former White House intern sex relationship with president. Okay, in those words. He changed American history, journalistic history, everything. Okay. The next day, Monica Lewinsky, 23. Yeah. Okay. The world exploded. Okay. And he had this source inside Newsweek, and Michael Isikoff, who's an extraordinary reporter, was putting this story together about how Bill Clinton, in the Paula Jones trial, which is one of the trials, sex trials surrounding Clinton, it had come out that he had had this relationship with the intern. I guess it was still in the grand jury or something like that. It wasn't public. Newsweek found out about it. I can pass that on to you. Newsweek found out about it, and they decided not to run the story. Okay, and it wasn't clear that they were never going to run the story, but they didn't run it that week. Time magazine was also after the story. Okay, this is all like Ticketmaster written in my soul, okay? Because I worked at Salon, and this became Salon's raison d'etre for the next several years. And but anyway, that the idea that someone would publish what was happening inside. This is happens all the time. Oh my God, did you hear what's going on inside the New York Times or CNN? Never happened back then. Nobody would ever talk. It was none of their business because those decisions are made every day. Oh, we're going to hold this story for a day. Oh, nope, you don't have it yet. Go out and interview a few more people. We'll run it next week. It happened every day, every hour, in every newsroom in America. All of a sudden, this completely responsible editorial decision inside what was then a major American publication became explosive, blew out the story. The next day, he named Monica Lewinsky, and let me tell you, what a ride it was. Okay?
Let me tell you what I love about that headline so much.
Sure.
XXXXX. Sometimes you need two more X's.
Yeah.
That's when you go to Drudge.
Absolutely, absolutely. And he had this whole nomenclature, be breaking, impacting, he had all these funny verbs. And then he famously put up these police siren emojis up at the
Yes.
top and stuff like this. And he's very weird because he's right wing, he's very conservative, he's anti-abortion, he's wacky, but at the same time he is in a weird way a journalist. And he would reveal explosive things about the right as well. And it was very difficult. And of course, one of the people he was associated with, Andrew Breitbart, who later turned out Breitbart News. And it became this weird infrastructure where Breitbart started this news thing. Drudge would drive traffic to Breitbart and stuff like this. So I have a little bit of ancillary personal involvement here to the extent that this was a big part of the early internet subculture or culture of the internet back then. And so what Drudge did was just had enormous impact. And sometimes Drudge would link to your stories. I mean, it was crazy when that happened. Just because it was such a thing. And people should go and look online. It's still there, and you can look at old ones and stuff like this. And it was just, he had this great way of writing. And, he, once in a while, he'd say, Wyman, blank, blah, 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 blah. Or other people at Salon, Walsh, Joan Walsh, who was a big political reporter.
You got drudged a few times.
Once in a while, yeah.
Yeah.
No, in fact, I was going to get to that in a second. Yeah. And it was a really, really... really amazing new type of journalism, and he really have to give him credit for that. And I actually have a really nice little thing from Drudge I wanted to show you.
Oh, yeah. Maybe six X's.
You can put it up, right?
Yeah,
if I show it
I'll
to
put
you.
it up right now.
Drudge, from Drudge, subject line XX. To Bill Wyman, the sum total of the message is, you jealous bitch.
From 1999. This is very early Drudge.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what would happen because we would write about stuff he'd do, because the thing is that sometimes you had to parse what he did, and sometimes he'd have these scoops that really weren't scoops, and so we'd write about that.
Oh, so you dissed him, and so that's his response.
Yeah, there was some backs and forths. And so when I was looking at, I actually found a couple other, can I read a couple other things? So one thing Salon was very, very pro-Clinton. And anti the vast right-wing conspiracy that was after him. Yeah. And I have issues with Bill Clinton because I think he should have resigned. I think if you're banging an intern in the Oval Office, you have to resign. Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah, that's just, call me old-fashioned. And so I wrote a couple pieces. One, I wrote a really big piece called It Was All Bill Clinton's Fault. Yeah. Okay. And that's one of the great things about Salon is that they would let you write. We had all these crazy people writing for us. We had David Horowitz, who was like kind of a crazy Robert F. Kennedy Jr. type person. We had Camille Paglia. We had really weird people. Nikki Fink. I had a whole relationship with her. So anyway, I wrote this, and how about this? Dear Bill Wyman, what a smart piece about the clearest I've read on the whole thing. Thanks. Best, Tucker Carlson.
Wow.
Okay. Got another one here I just came up with. Dear Bill, congratulations on a terrific article on Clinton, ! I agree with absolutely everything in it. A really energetic and hard-hitting piece. And I love the way you're unsparing on Democratic apologists. If Gore had been allowed to take office in 98, he's the one who'd be on the way to his inauguration today. Best, Camille. That was Camille Paglia.
There you go. You got all the connections.
Yeah. And then the last thing I was going to say, I was just going to show you, is that there's a Hollywood paper called The Wrap, okay, which Sharon Waxman does, which is kind of like Deadline or Variety or Hollywood Reporter, and they do a really good job there. And I hated the show Succession. And so I wrote a piece talking about how bad Succession was when it, on its finale, which got a lot of people going.
Always fearless views from Bill Wyman.
Okay, now this is a clip from the Drudge Report. Wyman, Succession, terrible series about spoiled brats. So that's very latter day. That was from last June of 2023. Yeah. So completely out of the blue, someone there, and I can't imagine it's actually him still. But
why not?
That's the way, that's the format it always was. Like Talbot, : it's time to drop the investigation or something like that. So nice. that was kind of a nice thing.
We got some Wymans.
That it came back. But I'll always treasure my email from Matt Drudge saying, you jealous bitch. Yeah.
That is
very, very on Drudge.
That's lovely. How long is your Wyman versus Wyman story? Is that take a while?
Yeah, I can.
You can do
You really care?
Well, we did have a correspondence with someone asking us when next time you're on to ask you about the Wyman versus.
I can
Wyman
tell a
story.
brief version. I'm not in a super rush, if you don't mind.
Tell the brief version.
It's very complicated because my name is Bill Wyman,
Yes.
the same name as the bassist of the Rolling Stones.
Yes.
At a certain point in my life, I realized that, I had the same name, the bassist of the Rolling Stone.
Probably
Bill Wyman
realised
is a
that as soon as
very...
you heard his name.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
But I kind of grew up in a weird area and it didn't really register. But and he's kind of one of the weirdest members of the Rolling Stones. He has a face that's always described as saturnine. He's always scowling. He's very short and diminutive, and he just didn't have much of a personality. So
all I know about him is that he's just sweet and rock star. That's it. That's all I need to know.
oh, that's so funny. You know that, yeah.
Novelty songs.
And he became notorious, I should say, that he was one of the most energetically exploitative of young, sometimes too young female fans.
Sure.
Okay. Notoriously so. And there was a whole thing with Mandy Smith. I just want to acknowledge all that because he should probably be in jail for all that.
Sure.
Okay. Leaving that aside, then I kind of grew up and I became a writer and I wrote about music and stuff like this. And very early on, this became something that was not interesting. Okay, to anyone. And you should know that as a writer, I saw the Rolling Stones when I was a kid, like in 78. But then when I worked for my university newspaper and I saw them as a critic, I got in free to see the Rolling Stones in 1981. And I've seen them probably 12, 15 times since. And I always get in free because I'm a critic. And my name, the fact that my name is Bill Wyman, nobody thinks that's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to make it clear, like since 1981, I've been calling up the Rolling Stones, saying, hey, this is Bill Wyman. I want free tickets to the show. And they go, okay. Nobody thinks that's interesting.
Yeah.
And then there was this interesting thing, though, that happened in Chicago when I was a writer there. And I started getting checks in the mail for like $52.31 or $29.42. And it's obvious now, the way I'm telling it, that it has something to do with that Bill Wyman. But at the time, it wasn't clear.
Yeah.
It had my social security number on the checks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of weird. And this is before the internet. So the name of the company was like Jack Smith Productions.
Yeah.
Wasn't in the phone book.
Sure.
Nothing happened. So anyway, it took a long time. Long story short, it was a guy who did what we call residuals for TV shows. So say if you were a violinist and you were on the Sonny and Cher show in the 60s and you were playing violin on I Got You, Babe.
Yeah.
If that TV show was rerun somewhere, some cable channel somewhere, the Game Show Network, you had to get all the members of that band, $4.50 that they got under union contracts, okay? So there was some network that was rerunning some old concert show that had the Rolling Stones on it, and so they had to send Bill Wyman his $29.32, and I was a member of the radio union, and so it got crossed. So I finally found the guy who goes, oh, you're not Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones? I go, no. And I just realized it's just an accounting error. I'm thinking, oh my God, rock stars. And he's like, oh God, I got to rewrite some checks, So
So how much did you?
I send him the checks back.
Oh, okay.
I'm a journalist. I can't,
Didn't purloin any of his residuals.
So anyway, that's how just to make clear, nobody thinks this is interesting. Okay.
Well, our correspondent does.
Nobody does. And then I was the arts editor of the Atlanta Journal-Constitution in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay. And I got a letter in the mail and it said, Dear Bill Wyman, you are hereby forbidden to use your name writing anymore. This is a cease and desist order. And if you don't stop it, my client, Bill Wyman of the Rolling Stones, is going to sue you and your newspaper and da-da-da-da. Okay.
And the thing about that, of course, is that that's not his real name.
I'll get to that.
Yes.
So I told my editor, I said, I'm going to write a little story and it's going to get a lot of attention because it's going to be really funny.
Yeah.
Okay. So I wrote the story and the punchline is, since I'm a writer, I know all about Bill Wyman. I've read his autobiography and he was married and he'd been in the Royal Air Force. He was like an adult. He was a real person from a nice suburb. And he was associating with the Rolling Stones, who were disgusting, smelly. This is in 1961. Like today, it's like, oh, they're rock stars. Nobody said, oh, they're cool rock stars. They said they're dirty, smelly, disgusting, long-haired people who should be banned by society, right?
Sure.
So he got to be in the Rolling Stones because he was older, he had good equipment, so they wanted him in the band. It turned out he was good, and he meshed with the drummer, and et cetera. But he changed his name because he didn't want people to know he was being associated with this. And he had a buddy in the Air Force named Lee Wyman, Wyman. So he changed his name a little bit. He did that after I was born. So I had the name first.
You were the original Bill Wyman.
So that was the punchline to the story. And I thought it would get a little bit of attention. but it's the Rolling Stones. It became international attention.
Yeah.
And you can literally look up online. I was interviewed probably on 8 different stations in Australia. In Australia alone.
Yeah.
Every radio station in England, Germany, France, Canada, the United States. It was crazy. So that gave me 15 minutes of fame. Okay? And the phone literally didn't stop ringing. The phone just rang all the time. It
I
was
bet
crazy.
Drudge was a jealous bitch when that happened.
Yeah. I think it might have been on Drudge, actually.
There you go. Okay.
So anyway, so flash forward. So anyway, so that was my claim to fame, and that just made me famous. And then nothing came of it because it was ridiculous, right? And then, but I did find out why this other writer said he was interviewing Bill Wyman 2 weeks before then, and he had been talking about me. He said, well, there's a writer named Bill Wyman. And Bill Wyman says, everyone's always stealing my name. They did that. And he goes off in this long rant. Because, the other thing you need to know about Bill Wyman is he's 7 or 8 years older than the other Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
So he's a lot older. He's a lot crankier. He's anal. And so he got all mad about it. And he called up his lawyer. And his lawyer said, Bill, drop it. But the lawyer said, no, I'll charge you $1,500 an hour to write a couple letters and stuff like that. So it became international news, made me super famous all over the world. It
What
was
happened
crazy.
to the lawsuit?
Nothing. Then, here's the punchline to it. About 2009, Keith Richards did his autobiography. Okay? And it's called Life, Keith Richards. Okay, so I read it. And I thought, this is outrageous. Okay. And everyone's talking, Keith Richards, he's the embodiment of rock and roll and stuff like this. And I thought, this guy is a sociopath. And then I'm really into the Rolling Stones. I've read everything that's ever been written about and stuff like this. And somehow or other, I was writing about it for Slate magazine. And I just thought, what would Mick Jagger say about this? And I started channeling Mick Jagger. So I wrote the review as if Mick Jagger had written it. Okay. And so it's all in the first person. He goes, I'm so fucking sick of Keith Richards. Let me tell you what it's like to be in a band with a heroin addict and then a broken down alcoholic who literally falls asleep on stage. My personal philosophy is that if we're getting paid $1 million a person to play music in a stadium, we should do our very best to get there on time and not fall asleep during the performance. So it's just Mick just venting.
Sure.
Okay, it was like 10,000 words long. It was like this huge history of the Rolling Stones. And I knew all these kind of meticulous, weird little things about Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. So I'd drop it in. I said, there was a note that was written on Monroe Sounds stationery. And Monroe Sounds is the name of this weird, obscure office, their office in London, which only people in the industry know. So there's little things like that. And then at the top of it, we had an editor's note. And it said, one day the journalist Bill Wyman got a FedEx package. He opened it up and he found this manuscript. And inside it said, hey, Bill, here's something for the archives. And Bill Wyman is well known as the archivist of the Rolling Stones. And as Bill Wyman, the journalist, read it, he realized that Mick Jagger of the Rolling Stones had written this about Keith's autobiography and had sent it to Bill Wyman, the bassist, to keep in the archives. And since Bill Wyman, the bassist, had tried to sue Bill Wyman, the journalist, a few years earlier, he had no compunction about reading it. And here's the manuscript. So that was just all made up. Okay?
Yep.
Slate publishes this, and it was by far the biggest article I've ever written in my life. Because, again, it's the Rolling Stones, went around the world. It was written about in Czechoslovakia, or in Czech Republic. I guess it was Czechoslovakia, Czech Republic. Everywhere around the world. It just became this huge thing. Oh, my God, Mick Jagger actually wrote this piece about Keith Richards. And then Slate was like, it was written in the satiric, it was written under satire, but you couldn't really tell that's what it was. Sure. So they changed the headline and da-da-da. But it just, I think it's one of the very biggest articles to this day that Slate's ever ran. And like the Twitter feed on it was just, I had like the first 3 days of it, it's probably 100,000 retweets and stuff like that. And I got interviewed again by all these kind of people and stuff like this. So it's just a lesson, like, you just, even if you're tangentially deal with the Rolling Stones, it gives you a sense of the enormity of their popularity.
So the irony is the only Rolling Stone you've ever actually impersonated is Mick Jagger.
Isn't that funny? So it was just kind of, anyway, so you can look that up. It's on Slate. If you look it up, anything about Keith Richards' life and Bill Wyman, you'll find it, and you'll find all these other articles too. And a lot of people really like the piece too, because I think it really captured something that it was, like I've always said, it was a piece of press criticism, because it was really about how everyone was accepting everything Keith Richards said at face value. And nobody talked about, like, the kid he had, they were both on heroin, and he leaves the kid with his heroin afflicted wife, Anita Pallenberg, and the kid dies in its cradle at like 6 weeks. Like, nobody talks about that.
Except for Bill Wyman, because Bill is fearless in his views.
So anyway, that's the Bill Wyman story.
Thank you very much. Now, look, you've been very generous with your time.
Okay, we should
We've
get out of
gone
here.
half an hour past what you asked, and in fact, we've gone so far that it's quite possible that there's going to be no time for Chaz Unleashed because we're getting damn close to the 3 hour mark, which is the maximum I can do at the ABC. So I'm going to put this together. I'm going to see how long there is. If there's more than 10 minutes left over, I'll do a Chaz Unleashed. If there isn't, then there won't be a Chaz Unleashed. You'll see me on Friday with Dr. Dave, and I'll just bring all these topics into that one. Some of them will appear a little bit out of date, but yeah, there's some good stuff there. So thank you very much, everyone who's hung in there till the very end, and thank you very much for your time.
It was very edifying for me as well. Thank you.
Very generous indeed. And Bill, stay peppy, folks. Stay peppy. Bye bye.
Hello and welcome to the other side of the white flash. That's right, this is Chaz Unleashed. As you can see, I'm wearing different clothes. I don't just change clothes constantly. We record the rest of the podcast on Monday afternoon. This is now Tuesday night. I'm about to put out the podcast, but I've now edited it down to the point where it's a slimline 2:33. So I've got 27 minutes to work with here. So I'm going to try and get in this bit about the red tie brigade that I've been trying to get in for the last few weeks. And I'm going to try and sneak in another stats nugget as well. If I don't have time for both, I don't have time for both, but I'm going to just head straight onto it. Let's see how much we can cram in. Okay, so red tie brigade. You might have seen these dudes at Trump's trials the last 2 weeks. They've been hanging around. They turn up. Usually they're Congress people or people who need to suck up to Trump for some reason. They show up, sit in the second row of his trial, so he doesn't look like he's got no friends like he did for the first few weeks. And then after an hour of bucking him up, making him feel wonderful, they go out and they hold a press conference where they say all the things that Trump's not allowed to say. And they all dress the same. They've got this uniform. At least if they're men, they all wear the same kind of dark blue suit that Trump wears and long red ties, just like Trump wears. It's kind of like the fembots from Austin Powers. They've got their own little sort of uniform going on. They're like drones, essentially. And I want to tell you how they started, because this is the value I have to add. So, apparently, it was Rick Scott's idea. Now, Rick Scott is a senator from Florida. I'll quote the dispatch. Scott had spoken with Trump campaign manager Susie Wiles at the Republican National Committee's donor retreat in Palm Beach, Florida, earlier this month, according to a person familiar with the conversation, and both agreed that Trump could use a demonstration of encouragement in New York. Something the two discussed, according to this person, was the number of Republican politicians who were raising money or appearing on television to criticize the prosecution of Trump, but not showing up to stand beside the embattled candidate. That's what led Scott last week to join Trump in the courtroom on May 9 and later give a press conference. So May 9 was when it started. Rick Scott was the first person to do it. Then the next day we had J.D. Vance and Tommy Tuberville, and then it went from there. Now, there's an important reason why Rick Scott did this, though. It's no accident Rick Scott came up with this idea. Last week, the week after this, Rick Scott announced that he's contending for the Senate GOP leadership against John Cornyn and John Thune. He's running as the populist in the race to be Senate leader. And it's not a spur-of-the-moment decision. He's run against McConnell twice, at least, I think, in the past. So he's been going for years trying with ambitions to be the Senate GOP leader. And so, especially at a time when the Senate is about to go Republican, maybe. So this red tie brigade idea of his was undoubtedly his bid to get Trump's endorsement in the Senate race. And that's really interesting because it shows, because Rick Scott's a pretty normal, boring guy, right? But it shows exactly how completely normal political jockeying that you just see every single day and under any circumstances leads normal, boring Republicans to push circumstances and events and behavior in weird directions to appeal to MAGA sensibilities. And you can, if you take a normal person, you put them in this wackadoodle environment and you expose them to normal incentives, they end up doing wackadoodle things. like this red tie brigade. So it's a wonderful case study on how things can go way off track, even with just normal people. So that's my value. Now let's have a bit of fun with this, because it's interesting the way it's developed. Like it really got people's attention. I mean, Rick Scott's kind of boring. He didn't get a lot of attention. But then on day 3 was when you had that classic photo I showed you before of the fembots. There's a quartet of Doug Burgum, House Rep Byron Donalds, Vivek Ramaswamy, and Corey Mills from Florida. 3 out of the 4 of them are hoping to be vice president. No surprise that they turned up early. And a different time on the same day, you had Mike Johnson as well. And they're all wearing the same uniform. Also, their message was coordinated as well. They were all saying exactly the things that Trump couldn't say because of his gag order, particularly about Judge Merchan's daughter. Donald said his daughter is raising money for Democrats, and all of the fundraising emails are about this trial that his daughter is using. This is a travesty of justice. Mills said the judge's daughter herself is also fundraising off this for people like Adam Schiff and the Biden administration. Ramaswamy said the real bookkeeping that we need and is an accounting of is Judge Merchant's own family member collecting millions of dollars as a Democrat operative, using the existence of this trial as a fundraising ploy for Democrats. Johnson said, among the atrocities here, the judge's own daughter is making millions of dollars doing online fundraising for Democrats. Vance, the day before, said the judge inside, his daughter is making millions of dollars running against Donald Trump, raising money for Donald Trump's political opponents. I hate the way they're all going after his daughter, even though I should say, I freely admit, if she was making money out of this trial, then it would be a shocker. And according to New York law, it would be a conflict of interest because according to New York law, if anyone related to you in any way at all is making money out of a trial, that's a conflict of interest and you need to recuse yourself. But she's not. That's a critical point. She runs a consultancy. Right, she books ads and runs marketing pushes for Democrats. Right, they're not going to do more or less marketing because of the outcome of this trial. Whether Trump is guilty or Trump is innocent or it's a hung jury, it doesn't matter. The Democrats still need to run ads. They still need to do mailers. They still need to put out emails. That's her job, okay? So it makes no difference to her career and how much she gets paid, whatever happens in this trial. So there is no conflict of interest. And it drives me crazy. They keep going her. I think part of it is to punish Merchant. Like I say, if you're going to come after us, well, look what we're going to do to your daughter. But regardless of the motivation, I can't read their mind. I hate it anyway. But the point is, Trump can't do it. But they can. Trump can't do it because of his gag order, but everyone else can, so they are. An interesting aside about this is where's the law on all this? Because Merchant's order prohibits Trump from, quote, directing others to make public statements about people like Merchant's daughter. So if they can prove that Trump told them to do this, then he's violating his gag order and he can go to jail. When he was asked if he directed the Republicans to speak about the trial on his behalf, Trump described them as his surrogates and praised them for, quote, speaking very beautifully. Enter New York Magazine contributing editor Andrew Rice.
Well, in court yesterday, actually, I was sitting close enough that I could actually look over Trump's shoulder and see what he was reading. At one point, he was actually reading the quotes that these individuals were, and going through and making notations with a pen on the paper.
Before or after?
While testimony was going on, while Michael Cohen was testifying against him, he was actually going through and annotating and editing the quotes that these people were going to.
Okay, now if they had actual proof other than just a dude with glasses on MSNBC saying it, then that might be an interesting little motion as part of the court proceedings. But I don't see any evidence that they can prove it. And I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Obviously, otherwise we would have already heard about it if it was going somewhere. Then, of course, the day after the original fembots, it really went off the rails because it went from the B graders, like all the vice presidential candidates, to the C team and borderline D team. You had Matt Gaetz, Lauren Boebert, Andy Biggs, Anna Paulina, Luna. I had a whole bunch of them. It was like 12 of them. And when Matt Gaetz, I mean, by this point in time, the crowd outside were starting to expect them, and so they were lying in wait to ambush them, which is, you know, as an ex-prankster, it does become fun when you can predict exactly what they're going to do and where they're going to be, so you can plan for it. And so, yeah, that was a great moment when someone held a bootlicker sign directly above Matt Gaetz's head, which I'm showing you there, while he was speaking. But even better, there was this wonderfully comic moment when Lauren Boebert wanted to speak. And I don't know, I suspect that they don't have a lot of respect for Lauren Boebert, because they didn't care at all. They just all walked off and left her behind. And so she tried to get her me time, and it just looked like they completely deserted her.
So much. And I want all of the news to start asking the question, what is the crime? Because everyone in this court has not been informed of what the crime is. The defendant does not know the crime that was committed.
And look, that's a fair point for her to make. I've made a similar point in a slightly less aggressive fashion, but I didn't do it while all my friends had just left me alone. In fact, I'll tell you what it reminds me of. This is an ancient reference. I'm really starting to date myself here, but it reminds me of the opening from Growing Pains.
We got each other, sharing the laughter and love. Sharing the laughter and love.
That sums up the Red Tie Brigade perfectly, I reckon. Sharing the laughter and love. That's what they're doing. It's my favourite moment, though, of all was when we went from the D team to the E team, when we had Lieutenant Governor of Texas, Dan Patrick, and Seb Gorka. You had some dude who was the boss of some bikie gang or something. He was like literally a criminal. And he looked like a criminal. I don't know if he was, maybe he was giving Trump some advice from his experience or something. I don't know, but it was such a random collection of people. But Dan Patrick took the lead, and he was teeing up all the usual talking points. But then he tried to suggest that the elite could do this to any of you, like any of you who pay off a porn star with hush money payments to try and hide a scandal from a presidential election. Anyone who does all that could be in this situation. Anyone. But anyway, a journo made an obvious point. Isn't Trump part of the elite? The man has billions of dollars. Isn't he part of the elite? And this is how it went.
What happens to any of you? If the courts in New York come after any of you because of something you said, because you said something the ruling class didn't like. And that's what all these other countries are about. They want to be sure that anyone that speaks up against the ruling class disappears. They want Donald Trump to disappear. They want to send him to jail. They want to take him off the main stage because they know here's their biggest danger, to taking the ruling class down. No, you know why? Donald Trump is not the ruling class.
Would a member of the ruling class be facing 730 years in prison? What a pathetic question. 730 years in prison, and he's a member of the elite? That's pathetic. You're not a journalist.
That was a great try from E-grader, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. But I just want to tell you what this has become about. What this is all about. This is all about is this not just neutralizing the charge, which is what people think. It's actually about neutralizing Biden's democracy attack. Because the response to Biden saying January 6th, the response they want is, Biden's even worse. You prosecute your opponent, and it's working. NPR Marist 2 weeks ago had a poll come out. 48% of Americans think a Trump return would weaken democracy. 46% think a Biden return would weaken democracy. So they're basically running neck and neck now on who would weaken democracy more. 37% say a Trump return would strengthen democracy, and 30% say a Biden return would strengthen democracy. So Trump's actually winning in that respect. So this tactic is working. Trump's either split the democracy issue now 50-50, or he's maybe even ahead. When with all the stuff he's been doing. It's incredible tactics. And that's what this is all about. It's about reinforcing that message. And there's more. There was more of that. The assassination thing, which I wanted to talk about with Bill, but I'll talk about with Dave on Friday, is another example of that. 10 minutes left. Let's go for the Stats Nugget. Stats Nugget. Woo! I might have to roll through. Okay. The latest projections for Social Security and Medicare have come out the last few weeks. Social Security is now expected to hit insolvency in 2035, and the portion of Medicare that pays for hospital visits and other medical care will be insolvent theoretically by 2036, according to the models. Now, that's actually improvement. It's actually been getting better. Last year, they had Social Security hitting insolvency in 2034, and now it's gone up to 2035. And Medicare was supposed to hit insolvency in 2031, now it's 2036. But we should explain what insolvency means. It doesn't mean that Social Security and Medicare goes bankrupt, like people suggest. Like you hear that phrase a lot, Social Security going bankrupt. That's not what happens. What it means is they exhaust the total taxes apportioned to them that they have raised throughout history, because they have levies where they collect money, right? And they have in the past collected more money than they need. And so they have this fictional bank account where they're storing the money. And eventually that's going to run dry, because now they're paying out more money than they take in because of the demographics have changed. And now there's more old people than younger people, right? So more old people are using Social Security and Medicare, less younger people are working. So they're raising less money and spending more. So now they're drawing down their account. But the truth is that account doesn't exist. It's not like they've got some kitty somewhere, some big piggy bank. No, that money they raised for Social Security and Medicare, they just put it in consolidated revenue and they spend it out like every other money. And this is just an accounting exercise, okay? So they have enough money because they raise money from taxes. And if they run a deficit, they can borrow money. So it's not like that, like the cupboard is bare. That's not the issue. But as far as accountancy goes, they will run out of the accrued benefits that are theoretically owed to the Social Security system by 2034. By 2035, and Medicare 2036. And the law says when that happens, when that moment happens, Social Security will have an automatic 21% cut in benefits across the board to help balance the books. So that's the issue. The issue is, will there be that automatic 21% cut somewhere down the track in 15 years' time or in 20 years' time or whatever? Of course, if that actually happened, there would not be a 21% cut. Let's live in reality here. Right now, no one would even consider making a dollar cut to Social Security. It's what they call the third rail. You get electrocuted if you touch it. So if the 21% automatic cut kicked in, what they would do is they would just fund more. They would just pay more money into the Social Security system or the Medicare system to make sure that people didn't have those huge cuts, because whoever oversaw those huge cuts would lose the next election for sure. They'd probably lose decades worth of elections. So no one is going to let that happen. But what it does do is that then puts a lot more pressure. This is like a sign that deficits are getting too big and the debt is getting too big, and it's becoming harder and harder to handle, essentially. It's one more signpost on the road to hell, essentially, rather than being one cliff that they're going to fall off. So the debt is now 96% of GDP. It was 46% of GDP in 1992. Any extra money that you apportion to Social Security and Medicare is coming out of the budget, obviously, so the debt would be higher. And it's only getting worse because interest rates are getting higher. The interest payments are getting higher all the time. And so that's going to keep on growing short of some pretty drastic interest rate cuts coming down the pipe. In fact, interest on the debt alone is more than defense now. And that's just getting more and more and more. And the fact is, Medicare and Social Security are a large and growing piece of the budget. In 2000, Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security were 9.4% of the nation's total economic output. Now it's past 14%. Just in the last 5 years, The numbers of Americans 65 and older has jumped from about 50 million to nearly 65 million, which puts so much more pressure on the system. And that's projected to be 75 million by 2035. So that's the problem. Once they hit that demographic level, 75 million, I think it's going to pretty much stay. Well, who knows how long life expectancy will increase after that. But assuming things progress like that at the moment, that's the end of the major problem, the demographic problem. But we'll see. So let's talk about how we deal with this. So there's no need to panic about this, but some reform would be a good idea. And people are scared to reform because reform loses votes. Reform is code for someone paying more money or getting paid less money. There are three basic schools here. There's a Republican study committee. That's about 80% of House Republicans. They're calling for Social Security starting age to be tied to life expectancy. Also, they're calling to reduce benefits for higher income earners. Now, as far as benefits for older people goes, as far as benefits for the richer people goes, I don't mind that. I don't mind if you don't pay the richer people as much Social Security or any Social Security. They don't need it. There has been concerns in the past that it will then start getting treated like welfare and people won't look after it. It won't be so precious a program if everyone doesn't get a piece out of it. It becomes more welfare and people start treating it like shit. Look, I mean, I understand the logic, but the problem is that there's so many trillions of dollars that are owed. Like what price are you paying for everyone getting a piece of it? In my view, if you could save some money by having rich people get less out of the program, I would happily do that. But yeah, your mileage may vary. I know Dave probably wouldn't support that. What bothers me is raising the eligibility age. That bothers me a lot because whose life expectancy are we measuring against here? In 1983, age eligibility rose for Social Security from 65 to 67 because life expectancies had gone up a lot since 1937. They went up about 7 years, right across the board. But since 1992, adult life expectancy actually dropped 1.76 years for high school finishers. They've gone up 4.17 years for college grads. So there was 5 years difference in life expectancy just in the last 30 years, five years extra. And so when you raise the retirement age, what's happening is you're not just punishing the people when they start getting benefits, but it means you reduce benefits for everyone who took out their Social Security earlier as well, because people can take their Social Security out earlier, but they just get smaller payments. Now, if you raise the eligibility age, you make everyone below that age get less payments, right? And guess who those people are? They're usually physical laborers. People like me make podcasts, they don't retire at 62. It's people who work in factories who retire at 62. People who have hard jobs, right? And so you're really sicking the poor people and the hard workers if you raise the age eligibility. I mean, some of these people aren't even going to make it to 67. Like poor people in America don't have a high life expectancy at all. Like you're getting really close to their life expectancy there. So I'm not a big fan of that, to be perfectly honest. To put numbers on this, just raising the retirement age by 2 years cuts everyone's benefits by 14%, which isn't far from the 21% automatic cut in benefits if you do nothing. So really, raising the age eligibility is a little bit like doing nothing in terms of the effect on especially poor people, but because it's even worse for them, but for all people. The second group is Democrats. They say it's a tax issue. They say, and there's some truth to this. If you reverse the Trump and Bush tax cuts tomorrow, you cover all the deficit except for interest payments. So that would make a difference. Mind you, no one's suggesting to do that. That would be a political killer to reverse all those tax cuts. Biden wants to make all income above $400,000 subject to the payroll tax that helps fund Social Security. Because right now, Social Security tax is cut off at $168,000. Above that, you pay no Social Security tax at all. If I had my way, you would pay Social Security tax all the way. That extra percent, the extra few percent for Social Security tax would be paid all the way up. Biden says we'll have a gap. Go up to $168,000 and have a gap where you have no Social Security tax, and then from $400,000 up, you have Social Security tax. That's what he wants to do. I don't know what you think about that. I mean, it's better than nothing, but personally, I think you need more than that. Trump, he's a third person, the third school in this. His school is he'll do nothing. Quote, unlike the Democrats who are killing Social Security and Medicare by allowing the invasion of the migrants, I will not, under any circumstances, allow either of these two precious gems to be even touched under a Trump administration. Biden is killing them both with the invasion, while at the same time destroying our country. Now, that's obviously bullshit. Migrants actually shore up Medicare and Social Security because they pay taxes into the system. Illegal immigrants, even more so, because they pay taxes when they work, but they don't have access to the benefits of Social Security or Medicare. Trump basically has no plan to shore up the system at all, except reducing waste, fraud, and abuse, which is Washington code for kick the can down the road, essentially. So, I mean, House Republicans themselves, who are into waste, fraud, and abuse, like getting rid of it, they believe there've been $16 billion of improper payments in Social Security over the last 5 years. Okay, $16 billion sounds like a lot over 5 years, until you realize that the program has a $4.5 trillion cash deficit over the next decade. Okay, so waste, fraud, and abuse aren't going to cut it. So his actual plan is a 21% cut long after he retires. That's his actual plan. And you know, honestly, that's probably the best political answer, because anyone who tries to solve this just gets punished as a reward for trying to deal with it and try and be responsible. You can always out irresponsible another politician. Politicians are very good at out irresponsibling each other, and they end up profiting as a result of that. Like if Biden went hard on raising taxes or on cutting payments to richer people or something like that, Trump would just nail him. And so every incentive is for them to do nothing, which is exactly why that's exactly what they've done. And that's where we're at. And that's in the Stats Nugget. I've run about a minute over after cut, but do one more little cut, but that will do. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you on Friday with Dr. Dave for PEP 161. Till then, stay peppy.